Chapter 208. 2 days later, the sound of steel colliding could still be heard in the inner room of the gym. The sharp sound echoed inside from morning to night. Even the intense singing in the gym could not cover it up. Now it finally came to an end and fell into a long silence. The door opened a little with the faint sound of footsteps. A dirty hand stretched out from inside, grabbed the meal tray at the door, and pulled it in. Soon, the sound of chewing came from behind the door. It was like a hungry beast chewing the bones and separating the flesh. It was a takeout that had been completely cold, but the sound was as sweet as a delicacy. Soon, the door opened again and the meal tray was put out. There was nothing left. Elder Luo glanced at it. Naturally, the gym staff walked over and picked up the meal tray to clean it up. After a short rest, the sound of steel colliding burst out again. It's been 2 days. Luo Xian glanced at it and lowered her head to continue knitting the oversized sweater for her father. She said casually, "Father, isn't it too difficult to teach him this kind of thing? When I was 14 years old, I didn't dare to say that I could learn it. It's only interesting when it's a little difficult." Elder Luo mixed the protein powder with carrot juice and said casually, "It's good if he can learn it, but it's not my fault if he can't learn it, right? It's good to let him suffer for a few more days. Otherwise, it'll be a loss to teach him so much for 100,000 yuan. Bad boy." The daughter looked up at her father and shook her head. "Are you so sure that he won't give up? Some young people nowadays look like they're smiling, but they're cursing in their hearts. That kid is different because he's more difficult to deal with." Elder Luo smacked his lips and recalled the taste of the carrot juice. "He looks bright and doesn't care about anything, but he's not like that at all. Sometimes he's as gentle as a domestic dog, but when he holds a sword, he's as fierce as a wild dog. It's completely incomprehensible. Even if he's not interested, as long as you put good things in front of him, he won't give up. Even if he knows it's bait, he'll swallow the meat and the hook into his stomach and tear the line." Luo Xian listened, and the knitting needle in her hand stopped. "It sounds good." "Yes." Elder Luo put down the teapot in his hand. "Sometimes, I even feel lucky that he doesn't have your talent. Otherwise, I would have killed him here. Isn't such a person good? It might be good, but it's not good for this world." The old man said calmly, "People like him, even if he doesn't learn these things to kill people, he will only kill more people in the future, thousands of times more than people like us. It would be great if he was the kind of person who was cold and vicious by nature. He could disregard the lives of others and himself. If he killed someone, then he killed them. If he died, then he died. He was as light as a feather. However, he knew what death was, and he knew the value of life more than anyone else. Therefore, when he held a sword, he was colder and crueler than ordinary people. Even if he might regret it, hate it, and repent, he would never stop. Not even 100,000 Mount Tai could stop him. Even if he looks like a pretty boy now, he will definitely be a disaster in the future." Luo Xian listened and thought for a while. She couldn't help but laugh. "I always feel like father wants to eradicate a disaster. But even if he is a disaster in the future, what does this have to do with me, a gym owner?" Elder Luo leisurely crossed his legs and continued to make the protein powder. "He pays, I teach. Even if more people die, it has nothing to do with me." He listened to the bitter and persistent sounds of the sword in the inner room, basked in the afternoon sun, and enjoyed the joy of torturing people. He took 2 mouthfuls of his daughter's special protein powder. It was another beautiful day. Who cares about the flood in the future? Under the gentle afternoon sun, in the lobby on the first floor of the Jinling branch of the Astronomical Society, A.I. Ching saw the man sitting on the sofa and reading the newspaper. After many years, he didn't look as rough as before. Now, he was wearing a decent suit with a gentle smile on his face. When he saw A.I. Ching finally appear, he took off his glasses, closed the newspaper, and waved at her. "It looks like you have something to do." Chai Fei glanced at him and knew the identity of the visitor. "Do you need me to help you take the afternoon off?" "No need. You go up first. I'll come later." A.I. Ching replied faintly. She moved her wheelchair to the front of the sofa and looked at the smiling face that didn't hide her joy. After a long time, she sighed softly. Brother Enya, long time no see. After hearing Xiao Yan's words, I thought you would kick me out. I was almost fooled by him. The man named Enya sat forward a little and looked at her cheeks. After a long time, he ruffled her hair without hesitation. When he saw AI Ching's angry face, he couldn't help but laugh. You've really lost weight. AI Ching calmly smoothed her hair and asked, other than other people's weight, what else can you think of? Enya smiled awkwardly and shrugged. I wanted to ask you if you met someone you like, but then I thought that you might scold me even more, so I didn't dare to ask. AI Ching shook her head, but didn't retort. In the Big Een family, since her parents died, the one who had been taking care of her was her cousin, who was regarded as the future head of the family. If it weren't for Enya, she probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to study in London, let alone other things. Now that she saw her cousin who took care of her, it would be a lie to say that she was unhappy. But after so many years, she had changed from a little girl to an inspector of the Astronomy Society, and his achievements were even more amazing. It was said that a few days ago, he had broken through the 3rd stage at the border and stepped into the 4th stage, star anemone. Such a person was enough to support a family in the present. Presumably, after the old Een master passed away, he would be the head of the Een family. Their identities were completely different from the past. Even though Een took care of her, now he was going to represent the Een family. After a short silence, she didn't want to continue in this awkward atmosphere, so she directly asked, Big brother, why did you come to me this time? Don't you want to eat some fruit first? When I came back from the border, I specially brought it for you. Try it, it tastes very good. Enya stretched out his hand and picked up the net bag onto the table. There were several white fruits that looked like dragon fruits inside, exuding a burst of sweet fragrance, making people salivate. AI Ching didn't say anything and just looked at him. After a long time, he also felt a little helpless and put the fruits on the table. No matter if this matter is successful or not, the fruits are specially brought by Big Brother for you. You have to accept it, right? AI Ching nodded. Then, Enya's expression became relieved, and he felt joy from the bottom of his heart. After pondering for a moment, he didn't want to beat around the bush in front of his sister, so he directly asked, Now that Big Brother is able to protect you, come home with me, okay? He said sincerely, Before I came, I told Grandpa that as long as you can go home, all the business in the family can be handed over to you. All the assets and operations of the Een family can be decided by you. What about Enya? When AI Ching heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Isn't he already promising? It's better to leave this kind of thing to a man than to a woman like me. He's still young. Enya answered seriously. For Enya, even if his cousin had become a reserve inspector of the Astronomy Society, he was still an immature child. He always liked to act according to his own temperament. If he didn't train himself, it would be difficult for him to take on a big responsibility. Before he came, he had already beaten up Enya because of the matter on the high seas. AI Ching was indifferent to this. He can grow up, can't he? One day, he can take on important responsibilities. When he grows up, he should be a man, Enya replied calmly. A man has to learn to support his family and not think about stealing things from his younger brothers and sisters every day. These years, little Yin has been a little spoiled. I've already sent him to the border. If he doesn't become an ascendant, don't think about coming back. AI Ching was stunned for a moment, and she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. With Yin Yan's spoiled appearance, it would be better to kill him than to send him to the border. Aren't you afraid that he will hate you? When a child is wronged a little, he will feel that the world is falling apart. When he grows up, he will know what a man should and shouldn't do. After saying this, Enya shook his head awkwardly. If he really can't grow up, then forget it. I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. If he wants to hate me, then let him hate me. It's better than being slaughtered like a chicken one day. AI Ching was silent for a long time and couldn't help but sigh. After so many years, you haven't changed at all. I'm almost 30. At least I've become a little taller, right? Enya shrugged and looked sincerely at his sister in front of him. As a brother, I can't do nothing. In the future, I must shelter my younger brothers and sisters. Little Ching, this is what I think from the bottom of my heart. I know. AI Ching nodded. Enya's expression suddenly became hopeful. Then will you come back? I won't. AI Ching shook her head and calmly refused. I'm living a good life now. To be honest, I don't want to have anything to do with the Ian family. Inya was stunned for a long time and sighed helplessly. In a few days, it will be your grandfather's birthday. You have to come back, right? What'll I do there? Congratulate him? AI Ching was amused. She lowered her head and looked at her wheelchair. Want to be annoying to carry this pair of legs? I know that in the early years, there were some things that the family did too much. It's reasonable for you to have opinions about the family. But great-grandfather has changed now. Inya hesitated for a long time. He has admitted that what happened in the past was his fault. If he can come back home, he can apologize to you in person. The old man who had always shown a tough face and never bowed his head in his life would apologize. It sounded like a joke, but Inya's expression was serious and solemn. Besides, he had never lied to AI Ching. I feel that he's more reasonable than before. AI Ching nodded slightly. This is expected. After the bloody accumulation stage, capitalists will start to be kind, won't they? After they don't need to fight for food like wild dogs, they will start to flaunt their benevolence. Otherwise, they will be looked down upon. She paused for a moment, looked at her cousin in front of her, and said to him seriously, although I don't know how sincere the old man is, it's useless to say this to me, right? If he wants to apologize, shouldn't he tell my mother in person? Inya sighed and didn't know what to say. After a long silence, he could only say softly, I have the final say in many things in the family. If you can come back home, I can protect you. At least I can guarantee that what happened in the past won't happen again. AI Ching was silent for a long time. She didn't speak and just stared at him. For some reason, she suddenly laughed softly. Brother, if you can promise me a little earlier, I won't be called a crazy woman in a wheelchair behind my back. She withdrew her gaze. I should be angry, brother. Although I don't hate you, I don't even want to argue with people about what happened in the past. I can only tell you that I'm living a good life now. I have my own job and things I want to do. I don't need the Ian family to take care of other things. Is there no room for negotiation? Why do you want to reason with a crazy woman? Brother, is a person's forgiveness really so important to you? Or is it that the old man will be afraid if there is a cripple in the way? Inya didn't speak anymore. Time passed quietly. When the clock rang, he got up, took out a plane ticket from his pocket, and placed it in front of AI Ching. Find a way to transfer abroad, Xiao Ching. Go to London, Rome, anywhere is fine. He said, I'll leave tonight. You can't wait to do it so soon? AI Ching asked coldly. If great-grandfather really doesn't want me to leave, it's useless even if I have a plane ticket. If I say it's okay, it's okay. Inya looked at her as if he was pleading. This is the only thing brother can do for you. AI Ching lowered her eyes and didn't look at him again. After a long time, she suddenly said, I'm going to work. Brother, you should go. Inya hesitated and wanted to say something, but in the end, he sighed silently and turned to leave. Soon, the figure disappeared into the crowd outside the door. After a long time, AI Ching picked up the fruit left by Inya and returned to her schedule. Under the reflection of the afternoon sun, only the ticket was left in place, waiting quietly. In the end, under the cleaning of the construction site, it was thrown into the dust. On that night, due to the weather, other than a flight to London, no planes were able to take off from Jinling. It was a clear, starry night. There were no clouds in the sky. Just like that, the days passed one by one. Everything was calm and tranquil. As the Asian rookie competition approached, the Social Security Bureau became busier and busier. As the main registration points and entrances, a large number of ascendants poured into Jinling and submitted their participation information to the organizing committee of the Tomorrow News. In addition to the local ascendants of Dongsha, there was no lack of foreign faces. There were even ascendants from Rome and America who came to try their luck. For a large number of ascendants in the wild, this was a good opportunity to verify their strength and seek better treatment. For various organizations, it was also a good opportunity to show their potential and muscles. In addition to Dongsha's Taiching Heavy Industries, Giant Goose Group, Yaoqi Entertainment, and other major groups, there were also Yingzhou's Sodom and Run Xiaodong, Xinhua's Seven Stars Group, and so on. Even the Social Security Bureau of Dongsha sent people to compete, not to mention Ingzhou's looming hall. Several pedigrees were involved and simply treated it as a test and training for newcomers. Even the Theravada Tantra, which had never had a sense of presence, sent a few seeded players to try their luck. If it weren't for the fact that the Indian pedigree had been classified as Rome for historical reasons, this Asian rookie competition would have a direct competition between the two pedigrees. Even though a large number of people had been screened out in the preliminary auditions, there were still more contestants coming in. This was just the contestants, not to mention the audience that was more than 10 times larger. How could there be so many people willing to spend money to buy tickets to the once-in-a-decade rookie competition? After the Rome and America divisions ended, the Asia division was about to begin. As one of the main entrances, Jinling naturally became more and more lively. The big cousin was already very busy these past 2 days, but when he thought about how the Yangqing division was even more chaotic, he couldn't help but gloat. That kid Yuan Zhao also went to compete. When the big cousin received Mo San's leave request, he helplessly shrugged. Forget it. It's good to let him know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Don't be obsessed with his hairstyle every day. Is there anything else? The people from Ingzhou's looming hall also arrived today. They're at Xuanwu Lake Hotel. Do you want to see them? See what? No. The big cousin waved his hand. Tell them to go register in Yangsheng or Yanjing. This is Jinling. They're not welcome here. All right, keep an eye on that little girl Hoopa. Don't let her get angry and kill the people from Looming Hall. Don't worry, I already sent her to Yanjing 2 days ago. Is the list of participants from Xianyao out yet? He said it's free to register, and we'll go take a look when we have time. Mo Sin flipped through the list in his hand. Currently, there are about 20 people. Zhu Sun, Guan Hai, Luo Shun, Chun Xingyang, Shen Yu, Huang Shi. Shen Yu is finally not depressed? That's good, it's a good thing. The big cousin nodded. Is there a reply from Elder Luo? Let's see what Luo Xian thinks. Mo San shrugged. Luo Xian basically hasn't replied directly. I'm afraid it depends on her mood. The big cousin nodded and didn't say anything else. He took the list of participants from Mo San and paused. There's no Huaishir. He already registered as an individual participant. Originally, he could have formed a team with the astronomy club, but he's been staying in Elder Luo's gym these past 2 days, and we can't get in touch with him. He's still in there. The big cousin sucked in a breath of cold air. Looks like Elder Luo really pulled out something amazing this time. After sighing a few times, he buried his head in the report again and continued to have a headache. Time continued to pass. Is he still in there? Elder Luo, who came back from a stroll at night, heard the sound of steel in the inner room and raised his eyebrows in surprise. It's the rookie competition tomorrow, and he hasn't given up yet. I feel like his fighting spirit is quite strong. Luo Xian raised her head and listened. Judging from the sound, he's almost there. It's hard to say. Elder Luo shook his head. His footsteps are a bit weak. He's almost out of strength. He almost succeeded a few times just now. Luo Xian said, it shouldn't be far. When it comes to skills, it's boundless. It's not a matter of hard work. It's a matter of luck if you don't have enough talent. Elder Luo sat down and sipped the protein powder made by his daughter. He's almost at his limit. At most, he'll try 1 or 2 more times. Luo Xian looked back at the door behind her. I'm quite optimistic about him. In the inner room, the sound of footsteps sounded again. The steel trembled and there was a hoarse gasp. Although his breathing rhythm is correct, his footwork is messed up. Unfortunately, he's weak. The old man was startled and then shook his head. When he faints later, I'll throw him out. In that instant, he saw Luo Xian's eyebrows rise slightly. Immediately afterwards, he was also stunned. There was a loud explosion. The loud sound tore through the thick soundproof cotton, transforming into a thunderous sound that spread in all directions. The windows of the entire gym began to violently shake. What shocked them even more than the loud sound was that within the explosion, there was a clear sound that gradually rose up. It was gradually becoming louder and louder. It was the sound of countless steel vibrations in the blink of an eye. The 3 completely different voices overlapped in one place. shaking countless pieces of steel and causing them to resonate, forming a lingering sound that was like a torrent, spreading out in all directions. Whether it was walls, windows, or buildings, nothing could stop it. The moment it burst forth, it soared into the air and spread its wings. It rose with the wind of the night, freely soaring through the night sky. It was as if all of Jinling had been enveloped by this thin ripple of origin substance. It was as if it had sensed something. In that instant, the youth who was training hard with a gun in the Social Security Bureau, the man who was meditating in the astronomy club, and even the girl who was wandering on the streets, dozens of ascendants raised their heads in unison and stared at the source of the sound. Then, the door that had been sealed for a week finally opened. Who said, "I can't do it"? Huaisher staggered out from behind the door. He held onto the door frame, almost unable to stand steadily. But when he saw Elder Luo, he proudly raised his head and revealed a proud smile on his pale face. "It's just a cord. Can stop me?" The old man opened his mouth to speak. But before he could say anything, he saw the youth fall straight to the ground and faint. There was the sound of snoring. In the silence, the father and daughter looked at each other in dismay. "I told you, he can do it." Luo Xian observed her father's rare loss of composure. "You guessed wrong." After a long silence, Elder Luo withdrew his gaze and lowered his head to drink the protein powder in the pot. But his shoulders couldn't help but tremble. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his head and laugh loudly. 10,000 miles of Alchemy Mountain Road. The young phoenix is clearer than the old phoenix. The old man slapped his thigh and laughed until he was convulsing. I didn't expect that at the very end, he would give me such a pleasant surprise. And so, just like that, on the last day before the start of the rookie competition, at the very last moment before 12 o'clock, Huaisher had finally graduated. Chapter 209. Name: Huaisher. Age: 17. Gender: you're just a delivery man. Why are you asking so many questions? This is a special service from the sender. She said you'd feel uncomfortable if you didn't ask. The delivery man chuckled and looked at him with a look that said, "Don't be embarrassed, young man." Huaisher's face twitched. He took a small box from the delivery man yesterday. It was for Ms. Crow in Exine High. The box was light and seemed to contain something. When he shook it, it made a clattering sound. When he opened it, he found a key ring and 2 pieces of paper. The key ring looked simple. It was a square piece of iron the size of a thumb with a chain hanging on it. It didn't look impressive, but when he touched it with his thumb, he could feel that the black iron piece seemed to be engraved with many invisible Een runes. It exuded a dark and cold aura. "I don't think it's anything good. I heard that you're going to participate in the competition. I specially bought you a love amulet. Take good care of it." Huaisher saw Crow's message on the first piece of paper. His face twitched. Okay, now he could conclude that this thing was definitely not something good. He thought for a moment. To be safe, he found a trash can and threw the key ring away. God knows what this woman is up to. When he picked up the second piece of paper, he found that it was a thin piece of sheepskin. It was quite old. There was a list of densely packed Egyptian cuneiform characters. There were also pictures of angels, the sun, and internal organs in the middle. There was no doubt that this was an alchemy formula. Huaisher tried to translate it. He found that the various hidden words were quite general descriptions. They were only useful to stop people who knew nothing about alchemy. He quickly copied it down with the Book of Destiny and translated it. Soon, he found that it was a kind of metal medicine that was quite simple to make. No, it should be called an aluminothermic agent. It was a metal fuel with stable properties and excellent effects. If used well, it was a must-have for murder, arson, and destruction. If he could learn it, Huaisher would have one more weapon. It could even make up for the lack of destructive power of his metal bombs. He wondered where the crow had gotten it, but at least he had done something good. However, after the name was translated, Huaisher's expression became even more helpless. Abdullah's wrath? He shook his head. You're hopeless. He shook the parchment and was about to stuff it into his pocket when he saw something written on the back of the parchment. When he turned it over to take a closer look, he saw a line of fine and clear handwriting. Prodigal child, what are you throwing around? Quickly pick it up. Shocking. How did you predict this? Huaisher subconsciously looked left and right, only to see people coming and going on the main road. No one was paying attention to him, and no one was looking in his direction. After hesitating for a while, he reluctantly reached into the trash can, picked up the key ring, and put it in his pocket. All right, in today's battle of wits, Crow won again. He just hoped that this sister wouldn't cause any more trouble. He couldn't take it anymore. He continued to move forward. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Jinling was already filled with people. Countless people were rushing in all directions. The whole city seemed to have woken up from a deep sleep. Their blood was pulsing, their hands and feet were moving, and their bodies were stretching. It was bustling. For most people in the present realm, outside of the present realm, things had no meaning. Naturally, they wouldn't pay attention to the rookie competition. They would just live their lives. But for many sublimators, it was the day of the rookie competition. In the Tomorrow News mobile apps competition column, Huaisher discovered that there were more than 7,900 participants who passed the audition this year. Although, according to the rules, as long as the sublimators were under the age of 30, whether they were from the present realm or the major borders, and their rank was not higher than grade 3, they were eligible to participate. But wasn't this number a bit exaggerated? But thinking about it carefully, it was reasonable. After all, according to the statistics of the Astronomical Society, there were about 170,000 sublimators in Asia. A considerable number of them were blank sublimators who didn't have the stigmata or didn't plan to spend a lot of money to buy the stigmata. If everyone could live their own lives, why would they waste their time fighting and killing? If sublimators wanted to make money, it wasn't difficult at all. Naturally, they didn't need to work hard from 9 to 5. As long as they had the ability and found the right direction, even if they didn't break the law, they still had a considerable advantage. More than half of them were working hard to get rich. In these 170,000 miles, after going through the registration and the audition, it was reasonable for there to be 7,000 sublimators. But 7,000 people. It would take a few days to count them all together. How could they compete? Because the rules of each rookie competition were completely different, and even different regions were different, the previous records didn't have any reference value. The only thing that was similar was the high difficulty and the harsh trials and competitions for the sublimators, and there were often unreliable places. It was said that 1 year in the American rookie competition, all the participants were pulled to a prehistoric region of hell and played a tribal conflict. In the accelerated time hell, it was said that in just a few months, a few scholars from the Russian Federation joined hands and led a group of primitive people to climb the technological ladder at the speed of light. They relied on Big Ivan to settle everything. No one could guess what the organizing committee of Tomorrow News was thinking. They could only react accordingly and see who had a stronger foundation. Thinking of this, Huaisher put away his phone and stopped thinking about these messy things. He quickly trotted back to the hotel he was staying at. Last night, he slept like a log in the gym and didn't wake up until 6 o'clock in the morning. He still felt dizzy and exhausted. He took a taxi to the city park and ate a few green plants before he came back to his senses. There were only 2 hours left before the competition officially started. He had to hurry and enter the venue. The way to enter was quite simple. It was like participating in a cooking competition, but there was no need to find a fork in the road and wait until midnight. He just had to bring the official competition certificate issued by the organizing committee and find an elevator. After quickly changing his clothes, Huaisher checked the things he brought with him. According to the organizing committee, as long as he arrived, he didn't need to bring border relics or weapons of mass destruction. Even if he brought them, they couldn't be brought into the venue. To Huaisher, this was practically nothing. He himself was equivalent to a walking weapon rack and a biological weapon of mass destruction. There was no need for him to rely on external objects, so there was no need for him to bring anything else. He just took out his original set of chemical protective clothing and put on the helmet again. He also didn't forget to take a special epic item from the astronomy club, the human skin mask, and put it in his pocket. People were afraid of fame, and pigs were afraid of being fat. What if some strong person wanted to use him as a stepping stone to establish their power? When he was almost done, there were only 10 minutes left before the deadline for the contestants to enter the venue. He picked up the iron plate given to him by the organizing committee and walked into the elevator. The moment the elevator door closed, an unprecedented silence enveloped him. All sounds disappeared quickly. The outside world was stripped away as the elevator closed. The only thing left in the world was this small iron box and Huaisher himself. Without needing Huaisher to press it, it began to slowly sink. In the slight sense of weightlessness, it stopped in place as if it had landed in a basement. It's quite fast. Huaisher twisted his neck, took a deep breath, and waited for the elevator to open. However, the elevator door didn't open. Instead, as if it had finally finished reversing, he suddenly stepped on the accelerator. It flew up. In an instant, Huaisher's vision turned black. He only felt the elevator shake violently and roar upward. In a sharp and resounding vibration, it rose level by level. From F1 to the first floor, it quickly swept past the second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor, the fifth floor, and it was still accelerating. In the end, all the indicator lights in the elevator were completely extinguished. The rise didn't stop, as if it wanted to throw Huaisher into the stratosphere. In the end, it came to an abrupt end amidst the loud roar. In the overloaded smoke and the ear-piercing alarm, the elevator door slowly opened. A staggering figure came out holding the door, dizzy. Only now did Huaisher realize that he was actually airsick. As far as the eye could see, it was a pure white sky and earth. There was nothing in the sky above the entire world. There were countless elevators erected on the vast white land, and people were continuously walking out of the elevators. Under the guidance of huge black penguin-shaped robots, they gathered in one place and looked at each other in dismay. Welcome to the 9th venue of the Asian Rookie Competition. Please find your seat according to the sign and wait for the competition to begin. A black goose-shaped robot that was 2 stories tall bent down. Its 2 extremely cute eyes stared at Huaisher. Its eyes were emitting a green light. Above its head, there were dancing neon characters. Words such as, "Use money to create happiness," could be vaguely seen. In addition to this one, there were dozens of them wandering around the venue. Loudspeakers constantly played various voices. Please observe order. Do not crowd or fight in the venue. Please do not die in the venue. Please do not enter the exclusive resting area for Xinyue's advanced members. Scan the QR code and follow. One click to understand the rules of the rookie competition. You only need 1 origin crystal to become a member on the spot. You will also receive exclusive tips. May you ride the wind and break through the waves to enter the finals. Huaisher was dumbfounded. Was it that commercialized? When he found his seat and sat down, he realized that he wasn't the strangest person in the venue. There were many people dressed strangely. In comparison, he was only wearing a helmet, which was very reserved. The people closest to him on both sides were around 10 meters away. In addition, there was a white halo floating above their heads, forcibly blocking all attacks. In other words, everyone was forced to enter a peaceful state. At such a distance, he couldn't even hear a few words of trash talk. As far as the eye could see, he couldn't see any familiar faces. Even if there were quite a few people staring coldly at the people around them, provoking them with killing intent, no one was moved. A few people who had tried to fight in the venue had already been killed by the pitch-black goose-shaped robots that had descended from the sky. Then, they had been blasted to death by the announcement that the border is not a lawless place. It was unknown whether those goose-shaped robots were advanced technology or relics from the border, but they actually emitted waves of 4th-tier origin substance, firmly suppressing anyone who wanted to cause trouble in the venue. There were around 800 or 900 people in the venue. They seemed to be waiting calmly, but the atmosphere outside the venue had reached a climax. Inside the venue, a screen suddenly appeared above everyone's heads. In the midst of an impassioned melody and a beautiful CG animation, the Tomorrow's News logo and the Giant Goose Group's logo appeared. Immediately after, the camera in the broadcast room turned on. Before the person appeared, a long string of words that sounded like a tongue twister could be heard. "Hello, friends in front of screen. Welcome to the 19th Asian Rookie Competition organized by the Tomorrow's News and the Giant Goose Group, sponsored by Jade Lake Entertainment, Sodom Electronics, Rin Xiaodang Industries, Seven Stars Group, The Voice from Hell Organizing Committee, and the Abyss Choir. Using money to create happiness, Rin Xiaodang is #1 in the world, guarding Uncle's smile. I am the host of the competition, your good friend, Dieting. An honest, middle-aged face appeared in front of the screen. After finishing this speech that would take even 2 minutes to finish, he smiled at the screen and said, "I'm sure everyone can't wait for the rookie competition to begin." Then, let's cut to the chase and play a 20-minute advertisement. What 20-minute advertisement? Also, aren't you one of the top 7 ascendants in the Eastern Summer Country? When did you become the host of a rookie competition? For a moment, Huaisher was stunned. He had a stomach full of curses, but he had nowhere to vent. Soon after, he was swallowed up by the endless advertisements. Master Sword, a free gift with a click. The pinnacle of Eastern Summer's open world, Origin Fiend, is waiting for you to play. Online office, cloud display, cluster group's generous contribution. Come here and connect with your old colleagues. The plot is beautiful and touching. The two-dimensional giant, yesterday's broken boat. After the series of advertisements, Huaisher was completely numb and began to doubt his life. It wasn't just in the venue. When the camera switched from the advertisements to the competition venue, there was already a wave of boos coming from the packed audience. Negative advertisement. Get lost, host. We want to see the big sister. Ha! It seems that the audience reacted very enthusiastically to the advertisements just now. Don't worry. Scan the QR code below the screen and order immediately. You can also enjoy a 10% discount for Penguin Diamond members. In front of the screen, Dieting smiled calmly and skillfully threw out all kinds of advertisements and sponsorship lists. In the end, when the audience was about to smash the TV, it said unhurriedly, "Finally, before the competition officially begins, there is a surprise to announce." In order to bring the audience the best experience of the competition, the organizing committee has specially invited a mysterious guest to commentate on the scene. Dieting paused for a long time. After whetting the audience's appetite, it reached out and pointed to the entrance next to the live broadcast room. Next, let's welcome our live broadcast guest, Miss by Dizzy. Impassioned music began to play. For a moment, the entire competition venue was boiling. By Dizzy, the 14-year-old Eastern Summer second, the world's youngest crowned contestant. Most importantly, it was a beautiful big sister. For a moment, everyone's heart was filled with anticipation. Only Huaisher had a bad premonition in his heart. Wait, in such a serious occasion, it shouldn't be, right? Chapter 2:10. Then, until the end of the impassioned music, not a single person walked through the entrance. In the silent live stream, the Harkin smile had already stiffened on the spot. For some reason, the Harkin's voice rang in everyone's ears. Fortunately, just as the Harkin was about to lose all hope, the door to the entrance was finally pushed open. A soft sound of footsteps could be heard. Under the spotlight, a gentle smile appeared in front of everyone. Huaisher wasn't the only one who was stunned. Even the Harkin froze on the spot. It was as though they were asking, "Why are you here?" It was as though the woman had finally returned after a long journey. She was carrying a huge backpack, a sun hat on her head, and a hiking stick in her hand. But her smile was bright and clear. She looked around and couldn't help but be a little surprised. Is this a live stream? Did I come at the wrong time? So you know about it. The Harkin had a stiff smile on its face as it widened its eyes and threw a "Why are you here?" look at the Harkin. Then, the Harkin turned around and glanced at the Harkin as well, throwing back its hard-to-explain look. Then, the Harkin threw a look that said, "I knew she'd gone missing again. But wasn't she just backstage? Where the hell did she go?" The newcomer threw a look that said, "Urgent mission has been called away, so I'm here to take over." The two completed the exchange of glances. Like hell. It was like a chicken talking to a duck. In the end, the two reached a consensus in just a few short glances. Although they didn't know what had happened, they had to leave it at that. The Harkin's eyes were already twitching, and it looked as though his mouth and eyes were slanted. After a dry cough, He said to the audience in the venue, "Let me introduce everyone. This is our live guest, by him, Miss Baizé. Madame Baizé, please greet the audience." "Hello, everyone." Baizé sat on the chair in a rather reserved manner and waved to the audience in a soft voice. After taking off her sun hat, her black hair cascaded down like flowing water and spread across the ground like a meandering stream. Her smile was bright and beautiful. Is this the Baizé whose combat strength is above Fu Sangwang's? Huaisha frowned in confusion. He didn't look like he could fight at all. Or rather, he looked like he couldn't fight at all. Judging from his relaxed posture and sleepy appearance, he seemed to be at the level of an average Tier 5 origin substance. No, he was even below the level of a Tier 5 origin substance. But soon, he noticed the strange behavior of the audience on the screen. When they heard that Baizé would replace the White Emperor's son to commentate, the audience was stunned. After a group of people came to their senses, they suddenly slumped in their chairs and sighed in disappointment. Another group of people was stunned for a moment before they suddenly became excited and cheered even louder. Great! Although he couldn't see the younger sister, he could see the cute and beautiful older sister. Then, the two groups of people looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with disdain, as if they were looking at their mortal enemies. But for some reason, the stalemate disappeared in an instant. At the same time, both sides revealed a trace of gentleness in their eyes. They reached an understanding. There's nothing wrong with being a Lullicon. It's just that he was traumatized when he was young. Yes, there's nothing wrong with being a big sister. It's just that he lacks some maternal love. A strange thought suddenly arose in their minds, causing the dispute to disappear and peace to prevail. It was like an illusion. When Baizé sat down on her chair, the originally restless crowd instantly calmed down. It was as if they had been bestowed with wisdom and patience. Everyone seemed to have understood something, and they smiled at each other. It was very harmonious. Except for the Harkin. The Harkin's face was about to turn green. He frantically gave Baizé a look, telling her to quickly put away her divine mark. If they continued to be so lovey-dovey, the competition wouldn't be able to continue. What's the point of fighting? Friendship comes first, competition comes second. Just add each other on WeChat and become friends. Baizé seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. She revealed an awkward smile and tapped her trekking staff with her finger. In an instant, the silence was gone. There must be something wrong with the brains of those Lullicons. It wouldn't be wrong to shoot each and every one of them. What were those idiots thinking? If they were so lacking in motherly love, they should just go back to kindergarten. Peace was fleeting, and at this moment, the dispute was like adding oil to the fire, becoming more and more intense. Everyone's eyes seemed to be on fire, covered with blood vessels. The Harkin's ears twitched under his long hair, and he gestured wildly at Baizé with his palms under the table. Okay, this is enough. I'm hosting a competition. I'm not going to let the audience kill each other. It wasn't just the stadium. Even the venue itself was filled with tension. Even the pressure of dozens of steel geese couldn't suppress the eerie and gloomy atmosphere. Everyone was sharpening their swords as they glanced at each other. Huaisha gasped. He no longer dared to underestimate any Tier 5 combatants. If not for the fact that he had the Book of Destiny with him, he wouldn't even have noticed the sudden changes in the arena. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Everything was natural. Regardless of whether it was the calm and peaceful tranquility or the tense restlessness, everything seemed to be the way it should be. Everyone didn't even know how to resist. As the countdown ticked down to the last second, the awkward interaction between the host and the guest finally came to an end. The two men glanced at each other, and the Harkin looked up at the camera and revealed a beaming smile. Time is ticking away, my friends. The sound of firecrackers is gone, and the peach blossoms are gone. Wait a minute, bloody hell, give me a new teleprompter. That's the one for the new year. Yes, that's the one. He coughed dryly without the slightest hint of awkwardness. In short, with the arrival of the hour, I hereby announce on behalf of the organizing committee that the 19th Asian Rising Stars competition has officially begun. In that instant, Huaisha heard a roar coming from above his head. The ground beneath his feet trembled violently. The strange sensation that he felt when he was in the elevator earlier filled him once more. His face turned pale with fright, and he subconsciously gripped the armrest of his chair tightly. Then he saw the pale white sky and earth tremble abruptly. The dome that was originally glowing with a pure white light suddenly opened up, revealing the surging dark clouds overhead, as well as the deep rumbling of thunder in the distance. Under the dark canopy of the sky, the sound of crashing waves rose and fell one after another. Thick water vapor and splashing water droplets converged into a viscous mist that leaked down from the gradually opening dome. Everyone felt their faces get wet. Huaisher saw dew quickly condensing on the glass in front of his helmet. Thunder rumbled across the gloomy sky. It was a loud roar. A torrential downpour gathered in an instant and sprinkled down on the mortal realm. However, it didn't fall on Huaisher's body at all. In his astonishment, he discovered that the rainwater was actually rising up against the sky, flying out of the endless tide and disappearing into the dark clouds and lightning. The hurricane howled and burst forth with a roar. The dome finally opened completely to both sides, and Huaisher finally caught a glimpse of where he was. In this rain, they were on a huge freighter, sitting on chairs welded to the floor, quietly staying in the warehouse like goods. The surging tide and waves kept surging, teasing this huge freighter. It was like a toy, easily swaying, tossing, flying, and falling, smashing the oncoming tide, and moving forward with a loud rumble. In the dark rainstorm, a low cry echoed in the distance. Then, a deafening siren burst forth. The siren and searchlights tore apart the curtain of rain and mist, revealing the other freighters that were braving the wind and waves in this endless sea. The ascenders from the other subvenues looked at each other in astonishment through the rain. Only Huaisher sucked in a breath of cold air. He raised his head and looked at the gradually dissipating dark clouds above his head. "Damn, it can't be," as he whispered. The lightning and dark clouds above his head finally tore apart, a huge gap under the washing and shaking of the rain. From there to here, it seemed to span thousands of miles. It revealed the appearance of the sky. No, that should be the real Earth, surrounded by the darkness. Huaisher saw a huge, silent city. It was as if it was submerged in the sea. The darkness was like a tide, wreaking havoc in the vague outline of the city. The whole city was like a rotting whale in the sea, bobbing in the invisible tide of darkness, revealing a decaying and strange aura. At this moment, how could Huaisher not understand that she was already at the border? To be precise, he was in the tyrannical sea that hung high at the border of Asia. Under the protection of the giant Goose Enterprise, he braved the wind and waves all the way, gradually approaching the city under his feet. Excitement. A feeling of excitement overflowed from the mountain ghost's sacred mark, making Huaisher feel the anticipation and desire of the miracle in his body at this moment. There was also a deep resonance with the darkness in the city. There was no need for words. He already knew that it was probably the arena prepared for this year's rookie competition. Far away from the present and protection of the border, the light of sparks. A hell without a doubt. Just as the camera of the live broadcast reflected the outline of the city, all the viewers in the special seats fell into a brief moment of astonishment. Then, in the front, the representative of Ingzhou Looming Hall, the elegant old minister's face suddenly turned pale. "Protest! Protest!" He got up angrily and roared at the young man representing the Social Security Bureau. "I want to see His Excellency Xian Yao immediately." The young man, called Big Cousin, turned back, raised his eyebrows, and showed a strange expression. "His Excellency Xian Yao is reviewing the project of Jixia. If you have a request for a meeting, you can convey it through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs." "How ridiculous!" The old minister glared at him with his eyes wide open. "We express a serious protest against East Xia's actions. We will never allow such interference with our country's territory and sovereignty." For a time, everyone who understood showed an ambiguous smile. They did not get involved in the conflict between the Social Security Bureau and the Looming Hall, but showed an expression of watching a show. Chapter 211. What are you protesting about? Big Cousin was still calm. He put down the fruit in his hand and scratched his head as if he didn't understand anything. Although I don't know what you're talking about, it seems that you're dissatisfied with the arrangement of the rookie competition. But this should have nothing to do with the Social Security Bureau of Doomsday, right? If you have any opinions, you should directly respond to the organizing committee and the Astronomical Society. Isn't this a conspiracy of the Dongsha family? Mr. Laoqing angrily pointed at the city on the screen, his white beard trembling violently. Don't tell me you know nothing about this. Yes, you're probably the only one who doesn't know anything. Big Cousin replied coldly. The rules of the competition are agreed upon by the organizing committee and the Astronomical Society. About this special arrangement, it has been announced a month in advance according to the procedure. Didn't you check it? Unfortunately, a minute ago, the announcement period ended. Therefore, your protests and objections should be invalid. Announcement? Mr. Laoqing knew that he had been played. He forcibly suppressed his anger. Where is the announcement? Why don't we know about it? On the homepage of the rookie competition website. As he spoke, Big Cousin raised his phone and showed him the image on the screen. At the bottom of the Tomorrow News competition homepage, in the middle of a large pile of colorful advertisements, there was a row of pixels that could barely be seen with a magnifying glass. You see, as long as you click here, zoom in, every word can be seen clearly. Big Cousin zoomed in on the dust-like handwriting and squinted at the old man. Grandpa, times have changed. You should also learn to use a smartphone, right? As soon as he finished speaking, the expression on her husband's face turned extremely ugly. On the screen, the brilliance of countless stars suddenly rose. Between the dark sky and the heavy rain, Huaishir heard the roar of the sky again. Not only the cargo ship they were on at this moment, but all the steel ships that were lined up in a row and braved the wind and the heavy rain. At this moment, pitch-black cannons rose from the hull and aimed at the dark city below. In the next instant, countless sparks shot out. The dazzling seven-colored light shot out from the cannon and soared into the sky, dragging a long trail behind it as it fell toward the dark city below. Over thousands of star-like rays of light shot out. Relying on her dynamic vision, which was completely above the norm, Huaishir tried her best to see. Finally, through the rain and fog, she caught a glimpse of the star's body. They were large and small metal boxes, but each of them had a different color. Most of them were pure white, and among them, there were several hundred streaks of purple. However, what was even more eye-catching was the extremely sparse, faint gold mixed within, as well as several streaks of almost imperceptible resplendent dark gold. The stars of different colors fell into the city in an instant. There was no pattern to their distribution. But soon, the light dissipated, and it was difficult to see any trace of them. Huaishir reflexively pulled out the Book of Destiny and poured his origin substance into it. After illuminating the outline of the city, he marked down the locations where the dark golden light had landed. 17. A total of 17 dark golden boxes. Before he could finish marking them, he heard the Harkin's voice. This time, it didn't come from the screen. Instead, it came from all directions. This top expert of the Eastern Summer Country had finally revealed his strength. His voice seemed to burst forth from the trembling of all things. Even though the sound was loud, it still echoed clearly in everyone's hearts. Then, I will now announce the rules of this competition. I ask the contestants to listen carefully. This time, the competition will take place in the infernal realm below. As for the specific rules of the competition, I'm sure you've already guessed them. Once you descend into the city, you will no longer be restricted by any rules or laws. You can find materials and equipment to equip yourself as you wish, defeat your enemies, complete the mission displayed on the system panel, and obtain the final victory. In order to ensure that the competition is enjoyable to watch, we have also prepared a mysterious surprise for all the participants. As he spoke, huge containers were thrown out of the cargo ship one after another. They fell into the dark clouds below and shattered with a loud bang. Countless metal pieces flew out of the containers and connected with each other, forming something that looked like a satellite. A layer of faintly discernible light mist spilled out from within, enveloping the entire city within. The rules laid down by the Creator were imposed on the city. Heaven and earth were transformed. Immediately afterward, spots of light fell on the contestants, and a virtual interface appeared in their souls, displaying the contestants' identity information, current points, and the missions they had triggered. Now, the organizing committee has used the Giant Goose Group's Shinue framework to modify the entire arena. In addition to the system interface, it has also been given a false life. Within the framework, contestants who are killed will automatically leave the arena, and their lives will not be in danger. This will allow the contestants to display their abilities to their heart's content. However, if some unexpected situations occur, the Shinue framework may not be able to protect the contestants. Therefore, if you feel that you can't handle it, please head to the designated location in the outer area and apply to leave the arena as soon as possible. After reading out the malicious rules, the Harkin finally said, "Now then, you may choose your own landing location. If you don't enter the arena after the fleet has swept past the arena, you will be deemed to have forfeited. The competition will officially begin in 10 seconds. I hope everyone has a good time." The countdown began. 10, 9. Huaishir recalled the rules that the Harkin had explained. He couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. However, the countdown didn't give him any time to think. In the blink of an eye, the countdown had reached 0. The competition had officially begun. Dozens of streaks of light rose from the cargo ship and flew into the darkness below. A fierce battle began in midair. Huaishir instinctively wanted to press the button, but his heart skipped a beat. At the last moment, he retracted his hand. He looked up in the direction the fleet was heading. He recalled the location where the stars had fallen. Right in front of them, there was a large area where a large number of boxes had fallen. According to the records in the Book of Destiny, there were at least 3 dark gold boxes that had fallen there. Now, the entire arena had been re-established by the Creator. Under the cover of the Shinue framework, the entire competition could be seen as a large-scale virtual reality game. After spending so many years playing games for free, how could he not know the nature of the giant goose? Those boxes were probably the surprises that the organizing committee had prepared. No matter how he looked at it, there was nothing wrong with grabbing the golden box first, right? Huaishir held his breath and suppressed the restlessness in his heart. He waited for the fleet to slowly move forward and sweep past the dark city above his head inch by inch. When they were close enough, he pressed the button first. In the blink of an eye, flames enveloped him. He rose into the air and fell toward the dark city above his head. But right after that, he heard the sound of air being torn apart. Right behind him, there were dozens, close to 100, of flames soaring into the sky with him. The stars fell toward the dark city below. As he fell, Huaishir constantly corrected the angle of his flight, trying to get as close as possible to the area where the boxes were concentrated. But right after that, he heard the heavy sound of wind behind his head. When he turned around abruptly, he saw a winged figure rushing toward him. In the air, the sublimator in the form of a flying bird brazenly attacked Huaishir. Its flaming claws swept across the air, but it still extinguished the flames on Huaishir's body that were helping him fly. Seeing the figure tumbling in the air and falling to the ground without being able to adjust his direction, the winged sublimator sneered. It flapped its wings and accelerated its descent. But right after that, it felt as if its retreat was tied up by something. It was suddenly pulled back. In a violent fall, the flying bird paused and looked back in shock. It saw the rope wrapped around its leg, and Huaishir, who was using the momentum to counterattack. "You think you're so great with wings?" Bang! Huaishir's feet stepped on the winged sublimator's back, almost breaking its spine. But right after that, as it tumbled and fell, the rope loosened from the enemy's leg and wrapped around the winged sublimator's neck like a snake. It contracted. Just like a rein, it suddenly tightened. The winged sublimator felt the pain. It subconsciously spread its wings and stopped falling. Then it felt the bastard on its back lift his leg and kick the back of its head. Dissatisfied with the winged sublimator's slowing speed, it tightened the reins and coldly ordered, "Hurry up." Huaishur activated the origin substance in his hand. A large amount of negative origin substance flowed through the sorrowful rope and into the winged sublimator's body. The explosion made the winged sublimator dizzy, forcing it to speed up. In the blink of an eye, the person behind had already caught up. Following closely behind was a skinny man. As if he was weightless, he floated through the air and flew past Huaishur. His pale face suddenly turned 180 degrees, and poisonous flames shot out from his eyes. He didn't hit Huaishur, but instead hit the winged sublimator. In an instant, the winged sublimator under Huaishur's feet was burned by the flames. Under the pincer attack, it dissipated into smoke. It was actually the first to appear, and in midair, hundreds of falling streaks of light collided with each other. They had already begun fighting. After falling for a few hundred meters, quite a few people had already left the battlefield in the midst of the chaotic battle. Without the ability to fly, Huaishur could only miserably roll in midair to dodge. The rope in his hand was constantly thrown out and retracted, relying on the momentum of each target to dodge. There were a few times when he was almost hit, and there were many times when he couldn't catch a target at all. The city under his feet was getting closer and closer, which made Huaishur even more surprised. That city wasn't an ancient city like he had imagined. Instead, it was more like a modern metropolis with endless skyscrapers. In particular, in the direction where they were falling, there were countless skyscrapers. However, there was no trace of anyone, nor was there any light. There was only darkness that danced like a living thing, and pairs of red eyes that appeared and disappeared in the darkness like illusions. There was a guy who was greedy for speed. He fell straight down and directly installed a sharp lightning rod, and was eliminated from the competition on the spot. And while falling crookedly, Huaishur determined the direction in the hurricane that was blowing in his face. He threw out a rope and suddenly tied it to the railing on the top floor of a skyscraper, changing the direction of his fall and smashing diagonally into a skyscraper. The huge tempered glass shattered with a wail. Huaishur landed on the ground. The instant he was dozens of centimeters away from the ground, his terrifying falling speed suddenly slowed down. The force of his fall was offset by an invisible force. He successfully landed under the rules of the Shin-Ue framework and rolled into the glass shards on the ground. When he raised his head and looked out of the broken window, he only saw stars falling like rain, lighting up the silent sky of the entire city. He knew in his heart that finally, at this moment, the competition had begun. Chapter 2:12. Countless contestants were sprinkled into the dark city like stars. On the big screen, the red number on the upper right corner began to soar rapidly. Wow, more than 40 contestants have left at the beginning. The competition is really intense. The Harkin lamented in a tone that sounded like it was gloating. I hope there won't be any unnecessary casualties because of the competition for the items. As soon as he said that, the number on the screen jumped from 40 to 160. In an instant, more than 100 people died. Outside the deliberately isolated space, the Shin-Ue framework quickly pulled up the scene just now and played a close-up on the big screen, vividly showing the tragic state of the dead. Cheers of excitement could be heard from the audience. In the midst of such an intense battle, everyone became excited. A few contestants at the peak of grade 3 have left. What a pity. Diding sighed. Among the contestants this time, as far as I know, there are many ascendants with extraordinary backgrounds. Not only are they limited to the present realm, but there are also many contestants with rich experience in border battles. It is even said that a calamity musician has entered the venue. I wonder what the results of the competition will be like. Miss Bizet, what do you think? He threw the topic to the guest, indicating that she should stop slacking and express her opinion quickly. Don't let me say it alone. It's too awkward. Bizet thought for a moment and asked seriously, "Can we sit and watch?" Diding was so angry that he almost fainted. Fortunately, the director's office quickly captured an extremely exciting chaotic battle and threw it on the main screen, successfully attracting the audience's attention. In a park, a dozen ascendants began a fierce battle as soon as they landed in order to fight over a pale gold box. In the midst of the chaotic battle, a shadow that had been lurking for a long time suddenly picked up the pale gold box and ran away. However, he immediately realized that no matter how hard he tried, he could not touch the box. By the time the ascendants in the chaotic battle reacted, they had been reduced to ashes by a punch. What a pity! The Harkin chuckled mockingly. Oh, I forgot to remind the participants that the boxes of light gold and above can only be opened by those who have fulfilled certain conditions. That said, most of the restrictions on the boxes aren't too difficult. Just look around the vicinity, and you'll most likely find some clues. It's open. It's open. Following the rupture of the underground water pipe, water suddenly sprayed out from the fountain, splashing in all directions, instantly landing on the chest. The chest opened, and a pair of colorful shoes flew out. At the same time, the sublimator, who had been in control of the situation and was confident of victory, was killed by 3 contestants after a brief moment of daze. A few of the sublimators, who were obviously on the same team, picked up their shoes, turned around, and threw them out of the field, where they were caught by their teammates. After putting on the shoes, the fastest contestant in the team actually transformed into countless afterimages. He ran and jumped on the building against gravity, and even jumped twice in the air in an extremely illogical way. He was about to shake off all his pursuers in an instant. In the end, with a boom in the distance, it exploded into a ball of blood. Sniper. The boots landed on the ground again, spotless. Under the cover of the sniper, the picker quickly disappeared. That's the best long-range weapon in this batch of gold equipment. The Harkin raised its eyebrows in astonishment. Has it been snatched away so quickly? It seems that the sublimators of the Social Security Bureau have a huge lead. I wonder if the other contestants will turn the tables around. As though it had nothing to do with him, the Harkin's tone of judgment was filled with pride, and it made the others gnash their teeth in hatred. Countless scenes of fierce battles flashed across the screen. But soon, the first dark gold treasure chest was finally discovered. The battle once again fell into a stalemate, and the audience couldn't take their eyes off it. It's hard to predict the outcome. The Harkin sighed. Those with strength will be defeated by schemes, and schemes will be changed beyond recognition in the chaotic situation. The seated contestant of the Theravada Tantra, Orochi, has actually left the field. I didn't expect this at all. What do you think, Ms. Bays? Fearing that she would say something else this time, he added, what kind of contestant can take the lead in the battle at the starting line? Well, it's hard to say. Bays was stunned for a long time, as though she was thinking about something. Finally, she tapped her palm and nodded. It depends on luck. Those with good luck will definitely win. The Harkin's expression twitched, and he forced a smile. Can you be more specific? As for the details, let me take a look. Bays looked up at the screen in front of her and saw the countless scenes of the sublimators flashing across. Suddenly, she raised her hand and pointed at one of the shadows. I think he's very lucky. His results should be pretty good. The Harkin's expression twitched, and for some reason, he glared at Bays. Then, he looked in the direction that Bays was pointing at, and he was stunned. On the screen, there was a figure crawling up from the ground in a sorry state. He wore a dark helmet on his head, and his entire body was covered in a robe that resembled a chemical protective suit. He looked very sneaky, and the Harkin couldn't help but feel that he was up to no good. And more importantly, the data showed that. Only second order? The Harkin shook his head and then said disapprovingly, then let's wait and see. Huaishur was completely oblivious to the fact that Bays had praised him for his good luck. He still hadn't figured out where the hell this place was. It was almost as though he had fallen into an office building. When he looked around, all he could see was a dense cluster of cubicles and work desks. There were even a few pots of green plants in the corner. But the strange thing was that the entire company was covered in dust. There wasn't even a rat to be seen, much less a person. Anything was possible in hell after leaving the modern realm. That said, the discovery of a city that was also part of a modern civilization left him feeling a little strange. Just then, he heard a loud roar coming from outside the broken window. The sublimators who had just landed had already begun to fight. Then he saw a dazzling golden light break through the floors of a building not too far away and soar into the sky. A heroic voice echoed in all directions. Wow, a golden legend. That was fast. Fleischer sucked in a breath of cold air. It hadn't even been 3 minutes since the start of the competition, and a dark golden box had already been opened. There was a moment of silence. Then, all of the sublimators in the surroundings began to gather around the box in a frenzy. The battle was getting more and more intense. Then, there was a continuous roar. Then, a blinding white light burst out from the building not too far away. Wherever it passed, all of the sublimators who were trying to get close to the box froze in place. Then, a cold wind blew, and everything collapsed into dust. A single beam of light had wiped out at least dozens of contestants. What the hell was that? Fleischer didn't have time to observe any longer. He had already checked the location before he fell. According to the records in the Book of Destiny, a box should have fallen on this building. But when he came down, he couldn't find any traces of the box on the roof. The box should have been hidden in the building. More and more flames fell from the sky. The contestants landed on the ground one by one and rushed towards the building. There wasn't much time left for him. It looks like the first dark golden treasure chest has been sealed. On the big screen, the Harken nodded and looked down at the second light that lit up not too far away. It raised its eyebrows in surprise. The second dark golden treasure chest has been activated as well? That's fast. What a coincidence. The contestant that Bizet said was lucky is also there. The Harken smiled and gestured for the director's office to turn the camera over just in time. Let's take a look at that contestant's performance. Come, let me take a look. You're developing well, Bang. The screen switched instantly. Before anyone could see anything, there was a crisp sound. Then, a splatter of scarlet blood splattered on the screen. Countless people jumped out of their chairs in fright. What the hell? 10 seconds ago. As soon as Fleischer rushed out of the door, he saw a huge silver-white metal box lying at the end of the corridor. Then, the glass shattered with a bang, and a sublimator rushed in from the sky. When he saw Fleischer not too far away, he froze for a moment. Then, he looked down at the metal box next to him. Immediately, he was overjoyed and reached for the metal box. And so, the metal box fell apart with a loud bang. A shotgun engraved with gorgeous patterns emerged from the light and fell into his hands. When he looked up with a sinister smile, he discovered that Fleischer had already disappeared from where he was standing. Then, he appeared right in front of him. Right in front of him, he stomped his feet. The floor trembled. He subconsciously raised his shotgun, only to see Fleischer getting into position and throwing a punch at his chest. Drummer. Thunder roared. The sublimator didn't even have time to pull the trigger before he was sent flying and smashed into the wall. He couldn't get up even if he wanted to. There was a clear dent in the shape of a fist on his chest that was deeply embedded in his back. It was clear that he had been punched through. Thank you. Fleischer reached out and picked up the shotgun on the ground. He checked the bullets. There were about 6 of them. He raised the gun and aimed it at his opponent's face. Then, just as he was about to pull the trigger, he hesitated for a moment. When the sublimator saw that Fleischer seemed to be thinking about something, he was overjoyed. He opened his mouth and was about to beg for mercy when he saw Fleischer turn the shotgun around and swing the barrel as though he was swinging a hammer. Then he swept it across the sublimator. Bang! It was as though he had smashed a rotten persimmon. A mixture of crimson and pale white shot out, covering almost half of the wall and sputtering. It was a one-shot. There were only 6 bullets. He couldn't afford to waste them on such a person. The audience gasped when they saw such an explosive scene as soon as they came in. They became even more excited when they saw the video recording of what had happened. Was it really that exciting? Even Harken was slightly stunned. Then, under the table, it gestured to the film crew, asking them to bring in a few more shots. There were several sublimators approaching. He had a hunch. There was bound to be big news coming up. Chapter 213. As the corpse vanished into thin air, Fleischer heard a crisp sound. A copper coin fell from where the corpse had been. When he lowered his head to pick it up, he discovered that it was a small coin in the style of Ingzhou's ancient times. It was heavy and had a face value of 1 tael. He didn't know what use it had, so he put it away for the time being. Huaishir raised his gun and charged downstairs. Time was precious. He directly opened the door and wanted to take the stairs, but he was met with 2 stunned faces. There was also a person following behind him who lowered his head and continued to yell. "It's definitely here. I remember it clearly. Fuck." 3 people. Without wasting any time, Huaishir raised his gun and pulled the trigger. The person in front flew backwards, and the person next to him was splashed with blood by the flying red steel balls. However, the bullet was embedded in his skin and didn't harm his internal organs. This was a defensive player, at least tier 3. That person was also a tough guy. After taking half a shot from Huaishir, he didn't make a sound. Instead, he opened his arms and charged towards Huaishir. The steps under his feet were crushed under his feet. His speed was incredibly fast. That gun was definitely a product of opening a chest. It was incredibly powerful, and even he couldn't defend against it. He definitely couldn't give Huaishir a second chance to pull the trigger. Then he saw Huaishir toss the shotgun into the air and charge towards him. A jumping chop. The light of an axe flashed. The heavy blade of the axe wedged itself into the opponent's head. Anger burst forth, shaking the origin's substance. In that instant of astonishment, Huaishir raised his hand and slapped it 4 times. Every time he moved, he hit. After brushing past him, the sacrificial knife that had pierced his chest spat out a hot mist of blood. He died on the spot. So many pieces of equipment. This bastard. How many chests had he opened? In his shock, that person couldn't accept the reality that he had seen. He fell backwards, leaving behind a despairing question. Why? Are there also pay-to-win players here? Huaishir had already stepped on his corpse and leapt into the air. He grabbed the shotgun that had fallen from the air and aimed it at the last raised face. The trigger was pulled. The moment he landed on the ground, he casually grabbed the 3 Judge Jean that were flying in the air, stuffed them into his pocket, and continued running. His hands did not stop moving. He pried open the lever-type shotgun, threw out the hot shell, and stuffed in 2 bullets. The body of the shotgun closed. His foot kicked open a door, and he looked into the room behind it. The search began. The live stream fell into a brief silence. Even the audience was shocked by the straightforward and fierce fighting style that didn't have the slightest bit of sloppiness. In an instant, the 3 contestants were killed as if they were vegetables. The Harkin's mocking smile twitched for a moment. Taking advantage of the change in the camera angle, he lowered his head and flipped through the information on the competition. He really wanted to know where this beast of burden came from when he saw the information displayed on the teleprompter and the training records from the Orchard Gym. His eyes twitched violently. Damn, I haven't been back in a reality realm for only half a year. How did that brat, Zhu Hongqian, manage to raise such a savage beast? Wait, the Astronomy Society? This brat's background is a bit complicated. Director, add 2 more scenes and get the editors to focus. If the next 2 scenes are edited well, they'll probably be given a bonus. As he worked in secret, many of the scenes that were originally intersecting with each other were fixed on Huaishir. He wanted to see who would emerge victorious this time. Nothing. 3 minutes passed. Huaishir had already searched 2 floors, but he still hadn't found the dark gold treasure chest. He began to feel more and more anxious. He could hear more and more footsteps coming from downstairs. But in the midst of his mad dash, his footsteps suddenly stopped. He suddenly turned around and looked to his right. The elevator. Just behind the gap of the elevator door, there was a bright flash of light. There it was. However, the numbers on the floor were rapidly changing. The elevator was descending. Huaishir was stunned. He was furious that he had missed the elevator. He swung his axe and sacrificial blade, forcefully prying open the elevator door. He looked down at the rapidly descending steel cable, only to see the elevator rapidly descending in the darkness. Huaishir shook his head, grabbed a steel cable, and jumped down. The chase began as fast as lightning. At that moment, the elevator arrived. Someone pressed the button to stop it. In the elevator, the sublimator looked at the illusory golden light in front of him. As the elevator descended, the light gradually solidified. With every floor it descended, the outline of the treasure chest became clearer. But before he could be proud, he felt the elevator suddenly stop. He subconsciously looked to the right, only to find the door on the right closed. On the other hand, he heard the door on the left open. Oh no, this elevator has double doors. Before he could turn around, his head was smashed by the intruder. The intruder reached out his hand in ecstasy and stroked the increasingly solid box in front of him. He turned around and shouted to his companions in surprise. "I found it!" Boom! The elevator shook. The ceiling was torn apart by the axe. The burning mountain ghost held the sacrificial blade upside down and descended from the sky. "Bastard, what did you find?" The blade of the sacrificial blade pierced through the top of his head. Huaisher raised her hand and pulled the trigger, killing the contestant who was holding a submachine gun outside the elevator. His body flew out, but the P-90 model submachine gun in his hand and Judge Jean were caught by a rope as Huaisher stretched out her hand. They were pulled and fell into Huaisher's hand. The elevator doors closed. The elevator began to descend. The instant exchange seemed simple, but Huaisher had used all his strength and reached an extreme speed that he had never reached before. Before the other party had time to make a move, he had violently attacked and finished off his opponent. Otherwise, if they were entangled, it would be hard to tell who would win. Next to him, as the elevator descended, the treasure chest solidified a little more. The elevator was still descending. Countless footsteps were already rushing in the elevator's direction. Huaisher took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The elevator suddenly stopped and opened again. This time, a fishy wind whistled from both sides. The ascendants on both sides unexpectedly launched an attack at the same time. Then, they collided with the black muzzle of the gun. As the two weapons spat out blazing flames, a figure flew out and was blasted into meat paste by the shotgun. However, outside the door on the left, an illusory figure flew in at an extremely fast speed. The spray from a submachine gun was not as wide as the hail of bullets from the shotgun, so he was able to dodge it. Then, his body suddenly turned illusory. The translucent body passed through the blazing submachine gun and pounced straight into Huaisher's body. The elevator roared loudly. Under Huaisher's trampling, without hesitation, Huaisher took a step toward him. He raised his arm, and his elbow was like an iron rod. The strength of a drummer burst forth, and thunder exploded. This wasn't a deliberate move, nor was it a deliberate combo. It was just a natural and pure inner door elbow strike driven by instinct. Pah! It was like a bubble bursting. Under the explosion of the drummer's strength, the illusory ascendant exploded on the spot. Blood splattered, and half of the elevator was dyed red. However, Huaisher's movements did not stop. As his left elbow pushed out, his left hand holding the submachine gun aimed at the broken ceiling of the elevator and pulled the trigger. With a whistling sound, the ascendant who had jumped down from the building like Huaisher did not respond and turn into Judge Jean. Instead, a Roman-style square shield suddenly unfolded on his arm and blocked the bullet. His entire body crashed into the elevator, causing the entire elevator to shake again. The floor under his feet wailed. Without waiting for him to land, Huaisher repeated the same trick. He threw away the submachine gun in his hand, and the blade of an axe appeared and chopped down. Bang! The blade of the axe was blocked by the Roman square shield. Then, the sharp edge of the square shield slashed at Huaisher like a heavy sword. Huaisher retreated to dodge, but the ascendant raised his hand and threw out a short stick hidden behind the shield. The sacred mark was activated. An electric light burst out from the short stick, stabbing directly at Huaisher's face. Suddenly, the ascendant's outstretched arm was abruptly propped up by the barrel of Huaisher's shotgun. The hot barrel hit the skin, and a sizzling sound was heard. The attack did not hit, and Huaisher's axe blade turned into a sacrificial knife in midair and chopped down at the ascendant's outstretched arm. The enemy quickly let go. In an instant, 3 of his fingers were chopped off, but the shield was raised again, blocking Huaisher's blade. Bang! Bang! The ascendant behind the shield saw that the situation was not good. He immediately shouted in Latin, "Leave the box!" and the Seven Stars group will be friends with you. Huh, Huaishur sneered. In the fierce attack, he retorted in Ingzhou language. We, the looming hall, don't want to be friends with you. But the opponent did not wait for Huaishur's response. In order to find a gap to regroup, in a moment of stagnation, he hid his body behind the square shield and suddenly charged at Huaishur. Electric light burst out. In the narrow elevator, the sound of wind and thunder was faintly heard. If he was hit, it would be no different from being hit by a truck. At the critical moment, Huaishur turned around and stepped, brushing the edge of the big shield to dodge. At the moment of turning around, the lever-type shotgun suddenly opened and threw out 2 hot shell shells, leaving a trace of smoke. 2 new bullets had been loaded into the gun body. Click! The gun body closed. As the shield hit the gradually closing door of the elevator, a loud noise burst out. Under the impact of the shield, the door flew out as if it had been hit by a bomb. The whole elevator shook violently. But right after that, the man felt the burning red barrel of a gun pressed against the back of his head. Boom! Jin Xiaobing fell to the ground. But outside the broken elevator door, the fierce footsteps were getting closer and closer. Revenge for Director Cui. 2 angry faces appeared from behind the corner and rushed straight at Huaishur. Huaishur raised his hand, caught the falling P-90, aimed at the top of his head, and pulled the trigger. The bullets swept in the elevator shaft above his head, and the sharp sound kept bursting out. In a flash, there was a dull sound of a steel cable breaking. The elevator fell. Down. Bye-bye. From a surprise attack at the beginning to the fierce response that followed, the fierce fighting style not only shocked the audience, but even in the VIP seats, there were many spectators who clicked their tongues, praised, and applauded. Only the representative of the Seven Stars group was livid. Sitting in the corner, he glanced at the old man of the looming hall, but did not say anything. He would remember this grudge first. And under the stare of the Seven Stars group, the old man of the looming hall also felt a chill down his spine. But more than that, he was dumbfounded and angry. That's not right. I didn't. This person is not ours. Ha! That kid really has some skill. The big cousin laughed softly. It's just that it won't be so easy to deal with next. That girl Shueya, sometimes even I have a headache. On the screen, the situation suddenly changed. Chapter 214. As the cable snapped, the elevator plunged past the 3rd floor. The sharp sound of friction from the closing of the safety gate was accompanied by sparks, but it was difficult to stop the downward momentum. The elevator, riddled with holes, was still descending. However, Huaishur felt a chill silently. He abruptly turned his head and looked behind him, only to see that a large hole had appeared in the twisted elevator wall at some point in time. A slender figure was already flying through the air towards Huaishur. A finger swiped downwards in the air. In front of that finger, whether it was the wall, the cables, or the outer shell of the elevator, everything was split apart to the sides. It wasn't a violent destruction. Instead, it was as if a door had been opened, easy and simple. It allowed that figure to pounce in unimpeded Peak Tier 3. Through and through Peak Tier 3. What Huaishur felt was an evil chill that was even more troublesome than the nightmare in the Social Security Bureau's prison. After lurking for an unknown period of time and seeing through Huaishur's details, that person suddenly attacked, piercing through all the obstacles one by one, aiming straight for Huaishur's vital points. Then, she saw a pair of ghost fire suddenly lit up under Huaishur's black helmet. A pitch-black fog formed by calamity ash and heart poison rose like a tide, rolling towards the woman who rushed in. What the hell? The woman was stunned for a moment. Her fingers did not stop moving, and an invisible force forcefully split the fog of the halo of fear apart. However, after the fog rolled out from both sides, a resplendent cross-shaped spear blade whizzed towards her. The spear of compassion whistled through the air, bursting forth with a dragon's roar. Under the infusion of origin substance, the spear blade lit up with a flame-like brilliance. The instant response had already used up all of Huaishur's strength. However, in midair, the woman's figure suddenly stirred up ripples like water. Huaishi's eyes blurred for no reason. Did he stab empty air? However, immediately after, the ripples dissipated. The woman had already taken advantage of Huaishi's momentary confusion to dodge the sudden thrust of the spear. Is this an illusion? By the time she reacted, the woman had regained her composure and attacked Huaishi. However, Huaishi sneered. The blade of his spear trembled, and dragon blood flew out and landed on her face. In an instant, her hair, which had been tied into dozens of small braids, turned pale. His energy dissipated. "Let's die together." Huaishi roared, raised his hand, and threw out a grenade. In such a narrow space, there was no room to dodge at all. The woman's expression changed abruptly, and she quickly retreated. As she retreated, the elevator behind her actually opened up a gap for her to enter and exit, and the moment she left, it closed up. At the last moment, Huaishi's grenade exploded. There was a burst of smoke and a few sparks. It fell to the ground and split into 4 pieces, quickly dissipating into origin substance. He had been fooled. The woman was stunned for a moment. Behind the closed elevator doors, the figure waved goodbye to her. The elevator started to descend. It was already too late to catch up. He had reached the first floor. Beside Huaishi, the dark gold treasure chest had completely solidified. The youth no longer hesitated. He reached out and pressed down, and a bright golden light shot into the sky. Wow, a golden legend! A heroic voice spread in all directions. The treasure chest opened. However, Huaishi didn't have time to see what was inside before the premonition of death erupted again, causing him to suddenly fall to the ground. Immediately after, in the midst of the rumbling, the elevator doors that hadn't opened yet shattered, and a large hole appeared. Then, a red-hot bullet brushed past Huaishi's helmet, pierced through the space inside the elevator, and flew out of the elevator on the other side, which no longer had a door. It smashed into a pillar in the spacious hall, and pierced through a hole the size of a mug. When he raised his head, Huaishi only saw that there was no one in the hall outside the hole created by the bullet. Through the shattered tempered glass door, on the main road hundreds of meters away, there was a thin figure crouching on the ground. The slender gun in his hand, which glowed with a faint golden light, was aimed straight at the elevator that Huaishi was in. Sniper. How long had it been since the beginning? And someone had already picked up an 8x scope and a 98K. Huaishi reached out and slapped the ground. Black fog rose up, obscuring his figure. Immediately after, he picked up the item in the treasure chest. It was actually a heavy vambrace and a thick manual. What manual? He didn't have time to look at it. He directly sent the manual into the Book of Destiny, relying on the origin substance to forcefully read it. At the same time, he grabbed the vambrace and rushed out of the elevator, afraid that the strange woman upstairs would chase after him again. As he madly ran, he intentionally avoided the sniper's aim. He hid behind a pillar, and in an instant, he was about to escape through the back door of the reception hall. However, immediately after, he felt his body tremble violently, and a large hole appeared in his chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Heavy injury. Then, the sound of gunshots suddenly rang out. Had he been hit? Huaishi turned around in disbelief, only to see the pillars of the reception hall. He had indeed been hiding behind an obstacle, but how had the bullet hit him? Could it be that it was the legendary gunfighting technique that allowed the bullet to change directions when the trigger was pulled? Wasn't this a bit too unreasonable? Under his feet, a stone fragment flew up, hitting Huaishi in the face. He lowered his head and saw the crack that had been created by the bullet not too far away, as well as his own shadow that had been hit by the bullet insinuations. Eastern Summer's third-level stigmata, Chi. Was this even possible? Huaishi suddenly knelt on the ground, panting violently. He heard the sound of footsteps not too far away. That woman had caught up, and he already had no way to escape. Elder sister, quickly go. That person has already been hit by me. A hurried voice transmitted through the origin substance link. Don't let him escape. Roger. On the second floor, Yi Shuya, who had broken through the floorboards, couldn't help but excitedly clench her fists. Luo Shan, good job. Immediately after, the last floor parted under her fingers. She fell from the sky, landing in the reception hall. She excitedly raised her eyes and looked forward. Then, she froze in place. Where is he? Following the trail of blood on the ground, she raised her head to look. She only saw that the trail of blood had stopped halfway, and in the empty reception hall, there was not a single shadow of a person. Very quickly, Yi Shuiya's line of sight locked onto the back of the reception hall, a huge table at the front desk. Is he hiding here? She casually waved her hand, suddenly pouncing out, and then pouncing on empty air. There was nothing behind the table, not even a shadow of a ghost. In the dead silence, Yi Shuiya looked all around, falling into a daze. Where is he? Where did he go? As far as her eyes could see, there was only a separated table, 2 chairs, a few sofas on the left side of the reception hall, and 2 pots of dry green plants. There was not even half a shadow. Ran away? Yi Shuiya did not believe in heresy and turned the entire reception hall upside down. She even tore apart a few tiles under her feet. After confirming that there was no place for anyone to hide, she coldly snorted and turned around to leave. As the sound of footsteps gradually faded away, the reception hall that was in a mess returned to its deathly silence. Only a few sublimators who clearly came late did not believe in heresy and went upstairs to search a few times, and then resentfully left a long, long time. Even the camera in the broadcast room was removed because there was nothing good to see. After that, a figure suddenly appeared in the air. It was Yi Shuiya who had already left. She suspiciously looked all around, frowning. Looks like he really ran away. But the army hidden in the surroundings did not discover any heavily injured sublimators. Could it be that the dark gold equipment was a stealth item or something to help people escape? After wasting half an hour, there was already no more time to squat here. She suspiciously looked all around one last time, suppressed the strange feeling in her heart, and turned around to leave. Another half an hour passed. A heroic shout came from afar. Wow! Golden Legend! The reception hall was still silent. Only the pot of green plants in the corner trembled a bit. In the silence, other than the cries of surprise from the audience outside, there was nothing abnormal. The pot of green plants trembled again. Still nothing abnormal. After confirming that Yi Shuiya, that woman, had finally left, the scene of the pot of green plants suddenly disappeared, revealing Huaishir, who was leaning against the corner of the wall, already on the verge of death. Oh my God, I'm going to suffocate to death. He wore that vambrace, crawling on the ground with difficulty, wriggling to the side of another pot of green plants. He took off his helmet and took 2 deep breaths. As a result, his face was visibly rosy, but the big hole in his chest still did not close. Raising his hand, he drank 2 more bottles of silver blood potion. Finally, it looked like he was in one piece. He exerted force with his elbow, propping himself up to lean against the wall, his lingering fear not disappearing. He had still underestimated the heroes of the world. A moment of carelessness, and he almost died at the spawn point, but all of this was unquestionably worth it. This round of battle, he had undoubtedly won. Huaishir raised his arm, scrutinizing the strange-looking vambrace on his arm. He could not help but have a happy expression. One of the 17 pieces of dark gold equipment in his hands. It was precisely at the last moment that Huaishir had swallowed the entire manual, using it to save himself. Although it was not as terrifying as the dark gold equipment that had killed dozens of ascendants with a flash of white light, its power was still strange enough. Illusion Vambrace. It was also known as the Portable Panoramic Simulator. That's right, it needed to insert a coin. He really did not know where this damn setting came from. According to the manual's description, as long as you threw in the gold left behind by the dead contestants, you would be able to perfectly disguise yourself as any object that the vambrace touched. As long as it was alone and not closely linked to other things, it would work. Although it was just a facade, purely on the surface, there was no possibility of being seen through. Even the user's body would be correspondingly enlarged and shrunk, without any flaws. It was impossible for any divine mark or any border-armed forces to see through its illusion without touching it. It was simply the best choice for sneak attacks, and camouflage. The cost was 1 gold per use, and there was no time limit. If you were patient, you could squat until the end of time. It also had another function called complete camouflage mode. For 10 minutes, it would consume 3 gold to disguise the user as anyone who had appeared within a 5-meter radius of the equipment. Perfect simulation. While in deep thought, Huaisher stroked the equipment he had just obtained, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up into a mischievous smile. But immediately, his face turned pale again, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. "No, let's hide for a while. I still need to kowtow a little more." He looked at the greenery around him, and there was still not enough. A minute later, a small stone chip quietly slid out from the ruins of the hall, bouncing on the curb and heading towards the park. Chapter 2:15. From the looks of it, the second dark gold equipment has already been obtained by this lucky contestant. At this moment, Di Ting, who was hosting the competition, lowered his eyes and looked at the footage sent by the director's office. He couldn't help but smile, and then he felt pity for the other contestants. The most sinister of the 17 dark gold equipment had been obtained by such a ferocious beast. There would be a good show to watch. Needless to say, in the Darknet's casino, Huaisher's odds should be skyrocketing. Di Ting waved his hand and rejected the piece of paper with Huaisher's identity written on it from the director's office. "It's not the time yet. What's the hurry?" He changed the topic and continued. "Next, let's see who will get the third dark gold equipment. The only weapon with a limited number of uses." On the screen, the various fights were still going on, and the number of contestants leaving had soared to more than 1,500. It had only been an hour since the start. If this went on, it wouldn't take 7 days. The winner would be decided tomorrow, right? Of course not. Di Ting hid the malice in his smile, and his eyes became expectant. Until now, the group of contestants who were happily killing each other hadn't noticed. From the beginning to the end, he had never said that this game was a battle royale. The first test was coming. Finally willing to leave? When little stones skipped away, on the roof of a distant building, the young woman named Yi Xia revealed a happy smile. But she just watched from afar, as if she had no intention of chasing after him. Beside her, Luo Shun, who was holding a gun, hesitated for a moment. "Aren't you going to take him down?" "Take what down?" Yi Xia turned her head, as if she didn't understand what he was saying, but also as if she had no intention of making a move. "Why should we take him down? We've already lost. We've been played 3 times in a row. If we rush up and shout for revenge, can we change the fact that he went around from us?" "Sister, it's fine as long as you don't let the tiger return to the mountain." Luo Shun glanced warily in the direction where Huaisher disappeared. "That guy always gives off the feeling that he'll make a big mess. Isn't that even better?" Yi Shui retracted his gaze and waved his hand indifferently. He has already proven his strength and qualifications. Rather than fighting with such a strong opponent in the early stages until both sides suffer and benefit others, it would be better to see whether or not we can meet in the finals. Moreover, as a good woman, you can't cling on to someone like a piece of sticky candy, right? Good woman? Smoking, getting tattoos, and changing boyfriends as if they were changing clothes was one thing. But how could there be a good woman like you who killed people at the border and beat up her colleagues and opponents just for fun? Luo Shun cursed in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it in front of her. He was afraid that his legs would be broken. In the distance, a signal soared into the sky, causing Yi Shui's smile to become even more joyous. The third piece of dark gold equipment was obtained. There are a total of 3 pieces of dark gold equipment in the Central District, and we've already given one away. Now, people can't say that the Social Security Bureau is too overbearing, right? She turned around, and in the whistling wind high in the sky, she lowered her head and gazed at the countless steel jungle below. Finally, her line of sight converged on the deepest part of the countless buildings, an ominous building hidden in the shadows. Next, don't tangle with irrelevant people. After tonight, attack the Mitsuyu building with all your strength. Yi Shui waved his hand. Spread the word. We don't care about the other places in the Central District, but we want the Ginza District. The other contestants either die or get the hell out of here." Along with her wave of her hand, faint starlight appeared in the sky, turning into countless fox-like silhouettes, following the wind into the shadows, spreading the warning from the Social Security Bureau in all directions. The sky gradually darkened. Like an illusion, it became darker and darker. Originally, outside the border, in this hellish area without the sun and stars, there was no difference between day and night. But now, everyone could clearly feel that night was coming. As the night gradually approached, an ominous aura gradually rose from the dead, silent city. It was like waking up from a deep slumber. The darkness and ghosts hidden in the hellish area gradually opened their eyes, peeking through the cracks at this group of people who did not belong here. Grinding teeth, sucking blood. Countless indistinct, illusory shadows appeared from the streets and alleys, as if they were the projections of another world bustling about. Occasionally, across the distance between life and death, they cast a cold glance at this world. Clearly, this was a hell that had sunk deep into the darkness, but from who knows where, there was a ray of light from the setting sun that made people feel even more oppressed. It could not illuminate anything. Instead, it made people's hearts feel even more uncomfortable. Not bad. I can actually bask in the sun. In the gloomy and lonely park, Huaishur, who was sitting on the grass, raised his head, looking at the dim light of the setting sun in the distance that carried a faint blood-red color. He didn't know if it was because his vitality was replenished and he was relieved, or because his mind was happy after basking in the sun, but he actually felt more comfortable and carefree. There was a feeling of returning home. Huaishur had just recovered from his serious injuries, and his qi and blood were weak. He walked through the dark green grass and the thorns with poisonous thorns, touching them one by one. Although he urgently needed vitality now, he did not choose to drain the pond to catch fish. Taking 1 or 2 points from each tree was enough. Anyway, there were many trees here. If he rubbed here and there, the vitality that he had lost would be replenished. And just as the countless trees swayed, Huaishur suddenly stopped and looked around in confusion. It seemed like he was lost. The park was clearly very small, and there were not many trees, but now he seemed to have unknowingly walked into a forest. He turned left and right, but he could not find the way. Suddenly, there seemed to be a shadow floating past in front of him. When he looked carefully, he could not see anything clearly. He only heard faint laughter coming from the darkness behind him, but when he turned around, there was no one behind him. Until he continued to look forward and saw that in the deepest part of the forest, under the dim yellow setting sun, a figure stood quietly, waving at him. It seemed to be calling out to him. "Come quickly, come quickly." The shadow called out kindly, "It's getting dark, come quickly." Calling me? Huaishur was stunned for a moment and pointed to himself. The shadow was still waving at him, motioning him to come closer, making him feel a burst of enthusiasm from the bottom of his heart. Although he felt that there was something wrong, Huaishur still followed the figure forward, following behind him. For some reason, the figure seemed to be standing far away. No matter how Huaishur moved forward, he could not close the distance. Instead, he walked and walked, not knowing where he was. The surrounding environment became darker and darker, and he could not see clearly. A little bit of the setting sun fell between the dark shadows of the trees, faintly illuminating the broken stone statue of Mithriya in the grass. The moss on the corner of Mithriya's mouth hooked up into a cold smile. But suddenly, the figure waving in front of him paused, as if he found something wrong. He strode towards Huaishur and looked at his face. The face of the figure could not be seen clearly. In the darkness, it seemed to be blurred, but at this moment, there was no doubt that it revealed a kind of anger and irritation. "What are you doing? You have to be careful." Huaishur was stunned. Really, I said something was wrong. Obviously, he did not speak, but the voice of the words was undoubtedly transmitted to Huaishur's ears. It sounded very irritable, but he still kindly reminded him, "Young man, where did you come from? Don't run around. Hurry up and find a hotel." The figure stretched out his hand and pointed to the road next to him. Go quickly. It's very dangerous outside when it's dark. Thank you. Huaisher did not know what had happened. Until now, he finally clearly distinguished the gloomy aura of the figure, which was completely different from that of the living, and a faint resentment and hatred. It seemed something was not quite right. It seemed that it should be a mutant and remnant soul that survived in this hell. But it did not seem to have the intention of harming him. He did not feel any malice from the beginning. Or rather, it was quite warm. Although he did not know what had happened, since it had pointed the way, then he would just go, "This is the way, right? Just walk forward. You'll be out in about 3 minutes." The figure was a little impatient. "Remember, you must never look back, or you'll never be able to get out." "Okay." Huaisher nodded and strode along the small path between the weeds. She walked around a few thistles and bushes and passed through the thick shade of the trees. Not long after, she returned to the street. When he raised his head, his smile stiffened. He looked at the unbelievable scene in front of him. Then he froze on the spot. What is this? At the same time, all the contestants felt a vibration in front of their chests, and a system panel from the Shinue framework popped out and displayed in front of their eyes. The main mission was updated. Time of the Devil, but the description of the quest was vague. It only said, "Now that we've encountered this rare moment of the devil, let's begin an unforgettable night tour." Or, before the long, sleepless night arrives, let's find a candlelight that can protect us. The countdown began. 1 hour. F*CK, the mission. In a dark alley, a thin ascendant beheaded the last enemy and opened the box in ecstasy. Then, he froze on the spot, his face ashen. F*CK, why are there bullets everywhere? I don't even have a gun. Why the hell do I need bullets? The 2 rows of golden magazines were flashing with a bright glow. It mocked him for the futility of his efforts for half a day. And when he was done with his futile rage, he bent down, picked up the magazines on the ground, and was about to turn and leave. Then he saw a thin figure standing at the entrance of the alley. It was a woman. She wore a long white dress, and her strange long hair flowed down her shoulders like black water. She wore a huge mask on her face, and her eyes, which were covered by her bangs, were faintly visible. They looked empty, as if she was smiling. She stared at the stunned ascendant. "Am I beautiful?" she suddenly asked. Chapter 216. Am I beautiful? While the sublimator was still in a daze, she took another step forward and opened her mouth to ask again. A gloomy aura rose and spread out, covering the light of the setting sun. She took another step forward, and her voice became sharp. Am I beautiful? What the hell? The sublimator finally couldn't stand the strange atmosphere. He clenched his dagger and rushed forward. Then, he saw the woman pull down the mask on her face. Immediately after, a bone-chilling chewing sound came from the alleyway. At this moment, as the light of dusk gradually faded, strange shadows walked out from the darkness. The demons hungrily patrolled, looking for their prey. They couldn't wait. Following countless sharp wails, the darkness that surged outside this narrow hell began to boil. It slowly rose, as if it wanted to drown everything. The signs had been revealed. The night was coming. After a long, long time, Huaisher recovered from the initial shock. He repeatedly checked the broken billboard erected on the building in the distance. Under the dim light, a smiling face appeared on the dilapidated billboard. But now, the smile had fallen apart and turned into an unsettling, incomplete, ferocious expression. Next to the smile, there were still words of the past, announcing to the visitors. Huaisher squinted her eyes and struggled to decipher the characters. What's a low come to? There was a gap in the middle, making it impossible for people to see where this place was. But at this point, how could Huaisher still not understand where this hell was? This was clearly an ancient city that had sunk in the disaster hundreds of years ago, outside the border. Yamatai. But how did the original Ingzhou city become like this? Also, wasn't it now in the open sea, being fought over by the Dongxiao lineage and the Ingzhou lineage? How did it become the arena of the rookie competition? Or, Huaisher slowly raised his head. In the last ray of the setting sun, he narrowed his eyes and stared at the empty darkness above his head. It was like an illusion. For a moment he saw something. Amidst the endless rising darkness, amidst the bone-chilling tide of darkness, a vague silhouette appeared in the sky. It was a wing, a pair of wings that covered the sky and the sun, shrouding the entire city in shadows. This place was already covered by the wings of the mystic bird. In the midst of the shock, Huaisher's mind flashed with a trace of understanding. The Dongxiao lineage wanted to use the rookie competition as an opportunity to take down Yamatai. But what did this have to do with my Huai Hai Lu Pei Chi? When Huaisher finally understood this point, and threw this question to the back of his mind, he realized that he had already wandered to an unknown place. He stopped outside the door of an ancient courtyard. In the gradually darkening night, the stone lanterns in front of the door, but didn't make people feel that it was bright. Instead, it set off the desolate scene in the courtyard, making it even more gloomy. As the withered leaves slowly fell on the black stone and white sand, in the pavilion in the courtyard, behind the layers of paper curtains, a cold and lonely voice sounded. It was a pipa. Under the illumination of the light, a woman in a gorgeous robe cast a cold silhouette on the paper curtains. She lowered her head and fiddled with the strings of the pipa in her arms. A hoarse and resentful voice spread out along with the melody. Sorrow meets the bitter rain, the world sighs in vain. Spring has no time to enjoy, the flower of helplessness has withered. Hate to drift away, hate to drift away. The mournful voice spread far and wide along with the sharp pipa sound. After the voice had dissipated for a long time, Huaisher raised his hand and applauded from the bottom of his heart. She sang really well. The rhythm of her exhalation is too powerful. Behind the curtains, the woman's figure was stunned for a moment and seemed to raise her head. There's a small problem. The last beat was a little rushed. Huaisher clapped with his hand. You see, it should be like this. Da-da-da-da. Elongate the melody a little. Trust me, it's not wrong. The woman's figure was stunned for a moment, and her fingers began to fiddle with the pipa, following his words. The final result was indeed better than just now. She seemed to be pleasantly surprised. She put down the pipa and bowed to Huaisher through the thick paper curtains to thank him. Then she raised her white wrist in the heavy sleeves and pointed behind Huaisher. Huaisher looked back and saw the alley behind him. Should we go this way? He was stunned and waved his hand to thank her. Thank you. Huaisher smiled from the bottom of his heart. This was probably why the world would become a better place if everyone gave a little bit of love. The local gangs here are all so polite. Although he didn't know if their words were nice or not, everyone seemed to be talented. He was beginning to like this place. Before leaving, Huaisher turned back and shouted towards the door, "Be careful of those people from the outside. They're all quite violent. It's better for girls to hide." The sound of the pipa intertwined, playing a mournful melody of farewell, sending off the guest. Not knowing what she had said wrong, Huaisher shrugged her shoulders and turned to follow the path she had pointed out. At the end of the street, in the dark, a few figures stared at the small phone screen in their hands, staring at the figure disappearing into the alley on the screen. Some stigmata's intuition was quite sharp. If one looked directly at them with malice, it would trigger vigilance. However, through special mirrors or electronic devices, this warning could be eliminated. "Old 5, are you sure?" The leader of the Ascendants asked in a low voice. "It's him. I saw it clearly through the binoculars." The skinny man called Old 5 said, "That guy has a dark gold equipment in his hands. He's already injured, if we can take him down." He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. The Ascendants looked at each other, breathing heavily. Then they picked up the huge cardboard box next to them and covered themselves. They shrank under the cardboard box, their auras strangely hidden. That cardboard box contained equipment from an unknown treasure chest. It wasn't strange for it to be placed so abruptly on the side of the road. Instead, it naturally became a part of the scenery. Even if they moved, they were silent and blended into the night. They followed closely behind Huai Shi's footsteps, following the distant sound of the pipa. Then, they lost him in the tangled alleys. They didn't know why, but it was clearly a straight alley, but they strangely went around and around. In the end, they returned to the same starting point several times. They returned to the same pipa music. No, something's wrong. The leader of the Ascendants squatted under the box, his expression becoming fierce as he pulled out his weapon. Be careful, we might be targeted by something. The pipa music became more and more desolate and cold, causing people to feel cold all over. From the outside to the inside, it gradually seeped into everyone's hearts, causing them to shiver uncontrollably. That woman, the leader's eyes were cold. I'm afraid she's some damn thing from hell. No matter what it is, let's go up and take a look first. Another Ascendant climbed out of the cardboard box, holding a pistol in his hand. A holy glow lit up in his hand, sweeping away the cold demonic aura around him, and he walked straight into the courtyard. It wasn't like he hadn't seen this damn thing at the border. No matter how strange and terrifying it looked, as long as he destroyed the main body. Then he lifted the curtain, then froze in place. Behind the countless hanging curtains, there was only a desolate oil lamp emitting a faint light. But behind the curtain, there was nothing. There was no trace of anything. In the stillness, the small oil lamp went out noiselessly. In that instant, the curtain closed again, and the darkness swallowed him like a tide. Only a scream, as if the soul was collapsing in shock, came from inside. Soon after, it was swallowed up, and there was no more sound. The original leader was stunned and rushed out without hesitation. Old Five, let's save him together. But Old Five had also disappeared at some point. In the empty courtyard, he was the only one left. The door closed behind him. Not long after, the door opened again, and the courtyard was still in a mess. A pea-sized lamp shone on the side of a beauty, gently stroking the pipa. Beaded curtains and brocade tents do not know the dawn. Who knows the endless sorrow in his dreams? The lonely and sorrowful singing voice spread far and wide. No one responded. It's almost time. Hooper raised his head and stared at the dark sky. There were clearly no stars, but in the pitch-black darkness, a faint moon suddenly appeared. It was like an eye looking down at the world in the darkness, spilling cold and tyrannical. At this moment, as she walked on this piece of land, no one could better understand the terror brewing in this darkness and the raging waves that could devour everything than her. She could feel the countless surging malice in the darkness all the time. In the end, it actually evolved into a strange melody, as if countless children were humming in unison from far away. The innocent tone carried a chilling, energy. Even the sacred Mark Prajna, who was also a transformation type, found it difficult to resist the malice in the voice. She was afraid that it would not be long before the demon wave of 100 Demons' Night. In the midst of rushing, her footsteps suddenly stopped, and she stopped at the door of a temple. A ray of light faintly came from the dilapidated temple. Sensing her arrival, the door of the temple opened slightly, revealing a dim light that did not give her any sense of security. Amber took a deep breath, pressed the hilt of her knife, and walked into the temple. She stopped in front of the temple, raised her head, and stared at the dilapidated Buddha statue. She raised her hand, showing the string of dark red agate prayer beads on her wrist. The last son of the Rigian clan, Amber, is here to stay for the night. Please be merciful, Buddha. In the dead silence, no one responded. Inside, Amber raised her voice again and repeated it, until a wooden face appeared in the darkness, staring straight at the girl in front of it, and finally, the gaze fell on the prayer beads on her wrist. Follow me, the face said with a dull voice, and then turned around, wriggling its snake-like slender body, and led her into the darkness. The temple door closed. Chapter 217. The alley wasn't long. Huaishir reached the end after walking for 2 minutes, but he seemed to have been stopped by someone. A pale hand stretched out from behind him without warning and pressed on his shoulder. Huaishir turned around in shock and saw the girl standing in the shadows in the corner. She was wearing a white dress, and her long hair spilled over her shoulders like black water. She was also wearing a mask. She seemed to be looking for help. Sorry. Huaishir was a little embarrassed. I didn't see you just now. Indeed, she had hidden it too well. Even Huaishir herself was shocked. Is there anything I can help you with? Huaishir asked. As if it was the first time she had been asked such a question, the girl was stunned for a moment and looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. Then, she suddenly asked, Am I beautiful? She suddenly asked this. Huaishir looked at her and thought. She had a good figure, but it was hard to say with a mask on. But soon, she seemed to sense that something was wrong. She narrowed her eyes and looked down at Huaishir's chest. Then, she saw a faint emblem on his clothes. It was a small pipa. The girl frowned and quickly reacted. She bowed slightly and said, Sorry to disturb you. Then, she turned around and left. Oh, wait a minute. Huaishir called out to her. The girl turned around and looked at him with cold and puzzled eyes. Huaishir was a little embarrassed by that gaze. After a long time, he sighed. Although it's not good to be so direct for the first time, you've already asked. I can't help it. He reached out and pointed at her forehead. You can't use this kind of foundation for dry skin. You're going to have pimples. Thanks to the teachings and influence of a certain male cowherd, Huaishir was now very familiar with this. His tone became regretful. Your skin is really good. What a pity. How do you do your skincare? The girl seemed to be stunned as she stood rooted to the ground. Only Huaishir continued to impart his experience. If you have time, how about you try the essence of the MKI? I don't know if I can buy it here, but you shouldn't wash your face too frequently with your skin. You should pay more attention in the future. As he spoke, he suddenly took a step back and carefully observed the startled girl in front of him from head to toe. Finally, his gaze fell on her face, and he frowned. He felt that something was not quite right. Being stared at by that harsh gaze, for some reason, the girl subconsciously wanted to avoid it. She wanted to hide her face in the shadows and turn around to leave. Don't move. Huaishir's tone became serious. Then, a cold blade light burst out from his hand. He stepped forward and flashed. Her bangs, which were originally a little too long, instantly became shorter and stopped above her eyebrows, revealing a pair of big, panicked eyes. Following that, Huaishir's movements were extremely agile. Left, right, then right, and then he fixed it. Everything was done. He took a step back, looked at his work with satisfaction, and waved his hand to disperse the blade light. That's more like it. He nodded in satisfaction and took out a shiny piece of metal. After wiping it on his clothes, he handed it to the startled girl in front of him. Take a look. With the shape of your face, you'll look better with a hairstyle. Just now, I felt that something was wrong. Your bangs are too long. The girl held the metal piece in astonishment and looked at herself in the reflection in disbelief. Her pair of big black eyes trembled, and she was speechless. Now, you're prettier than before. Just like that, the youth solemnly answered her question just now. She did not know why, but she could not help but lower her head and felt that her cheeks were a little hot under the mask. Okay, I have to go goodbye. Huaishir turned around, waved his hand, and said, It's late. I heard that it's quite dangerous outside. You should go home early. After taking 2 steps, he heard a nervous voice behind him. Wait a minute. The girl lowered her head and subconsciously rubbed the corner of her clothes with her fingers. It's almost night, if you don't mind. Can you come to my house to rest? Right. You haven't eaten dinner yet, right? Huaishir froze for a moment and heard an awkward sound from his stomach. Sure enough, he was a little hungry. Can I? He was a little embarrassed. Was there such a benefit to being a barber in the village for the first time? You're a guest recognized by Master Luani, of course. As if afraid that he would regret, the girl took the lead and walked 1 step ahead. She looked back at him and said, Please come with me. Okay. Huaishir followed behind, and then remembered that he did not introduce himself. By the way, my name is Huaishir from Doomsday. How should I address you? Ma-E. The girl walking in front said her name. You can call me Ma-E. Okay. Huaishir walked behind her, following her on the way home. Unexpectedly, the place was not far away. After walking for 200 meters, they arrived. It was an ordinary-looking single-family house with a small courtyard and a parking space. However, there was no car in sight. It should have left. My humble abode is simple. Please don't mind. She walked with Huai through the dusty door with a little shame. She opened the door and shouted inside, "Grandma, I'm back." "Mai, you're back so early today." A kind voice sounded from the kitchen and walked quickly in the direction of the entrance. It was an old woman wearing a gray Ingzhou native costume. Her hair was tied up and she looked meticulous, but her face was full of wrinkles, so many that it was a little scary. Seeing Huai beside Ma-yi, she was stunned. "Oh, you brought a guest? How rare. It's Master Lonnie's guest. I happened to meet him, so Ma-yi lowered her head and avoided the old woman's eyes. She subconsciously wanted to hide her hairstyle. The old woman seemed to understand something. Her eyes wandered between the two. Soon, she warmly greeted Huai. "What are you waiting for? Don't you want to invite the guest to sit down?" She bent down and handed a pair of slippers to Huai. After inviting Huai to sit in the middle of the living room, Ma-yi served tea. It didn't seem to be tea leaves, but Huai smelled a strong fragrance of flowers. "Please treat this as your home," the old woman said warmly. "When we were in Yushur, Master Luani had taken care of our family. Today is the time to repay her kindness. Please don't refuse." "Oh, okay." The Master Luani they were talking about seemed to be the woman who played the pipa. Huai vaguely realized that because of her, he seemed to be treated as a guest. Great. Not only did he have a place to sleep, but he also had free dinner. He couldn't wait any longer. Hearing the sound in Huai's stomach, the old woman smiled warmly. "Just in time. Ma-yi's father has just returned with fresh meat. Please wait for a moment." As she spoke, she got up and bent over to the huge box at the entrance. She reached out and casually lifted the top zipper and walked into the kitchen. Huai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "Auntie, you have a lot of strength. Such a big box, at least enough to fit a person, and you lifted it up so casually." Just as he passed by, the box shook violently as if someone was struggling with all their might. With a bang, a person who was trapped inside forcibly opened the lid and struggled to get out. He looked like he had been beaten up badly. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen. There was even a broken towel stuffed in his mouth. He looked very miserable. Then why did he look a little like Yuan Zhao? Huai looked down at the young man in disbelief. "Why is it you?" He still remembered this little brother who was a few years younger than him. Although he looked like he had a serious Chinibyu problem and often spaced out, as if there was something wrong with his brain, they still had some friendship. He didn't expect that after parting at the art gallery, the two of them would meet under such circumstances. He could only say that fate was too damn wonderful. Woo woo woo, woo woo, woo woo. Yuan Zhao widened his eyes and struggled to make a vague sound. Although he couldn't speak, the meaning was clear. "Pretty boy, what are you watching for? Hurry up and save me. Otherwise, this young master will tear you apart." The old woman looked at Huai in astonishment. "Do you know each other?" "It's a child I don't know. I don't know whose family he's from." Huai coldly picked up the teacup and made a suggestion. "He looks delicious when fried. It's best to cut him finely. That way he'll be crisper." Woo, woo woo, woo woo woo. Yuan Zhao widened his eyes and screamed with all his strength. He was so scared that tears were about to flow out. "Big brother, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Big brother, give me a hand, give me a hand. Don't eat me." Seeing that he had been taught a lesson, Huai put down the teacup and respectfully said to the old woman, "I was just joking. Madam, this is a long-lost friend of mine. Could you please let him go?" To be honest, he didn't know if the old woman would give him face. Hearing him say this, the old woman suddenly felt awkward. "This is rare fresh meat. Although you said so, but if we only serve vegetable porridge to guests, wouldn't it be inappropriate?" "It's okay. I've been vegetarian recently." Huai smiled and said, "If you don't mind, how about I cook? Don't look at me like that. I'm also an apprentice cooking demon." As if in disbelief, the old woman looked at him in astonishment. After a long time, she hesitantly nodded. "Since it's like this, This old woman won't say anything. The old woman said, but when it comes to cooking, please let this old woman help. Yuan Zhao breathed a sigh of relief. Tears streamed down his face. He was sobbing uncontrollably. At that moment, hoarse moans came from upstairs. It couldn't be heard clearly through the thick wooden planks. It sounded like someone was shouting for someone. The old woman frowned and raised her head to scold him. Shut up, old man. There's a guest. Don't embarrass the Hirata family. In a room upstairs, the moans stopped for a moment. Then, they heard muffled voices again. Eat, eat. Looks like everyone's hungry. Huaisher stood up and rolled up his sleeves. Where's the kitchen? I've been thinking of a lot of new dishes recently. Although I don't dare say they'll be delicious, they'll fill you up. The old woman happily led Huaisher to the kitchen. Only hemp clothes, who had been forgotten by both her grandmother and her guest, sat there resentfully. She felt so wrong that she almost cried. Looking at Yuan Zhao, who was still tied up and making muffled sounds, she frowned in disdain. Then she bent down and asked seriously, Am I pretty? Chapter 218. For some reason, Yuan Zhao didn't seem to have any appetite at dinner time. His face was pale, and he kept shaking in the chair. Eat, why don't you eat? Huaisher picked up the spoon and scooped a bowl full of porridge for him. The white porridge was fragrant and sweet, and there were 2 radishes with human faces and vegetable leaves that looked like internal organs floating in it. It gave off a very appetizing smell. In addition to the vegetable porridge, he also asked the old man to try to fry some tempura, and then made 2 servings of buckwheat noodles. Only the old man accompanied them for dinner. Lenin seemed to have brought the food to his grandfather upstairs. As for Lenin's parents, the old man only said that they went out to work and didn't say anything more. After dinner, the old man took them to a room on the 2nd floor. It had been cleaned in advance by Lenin, but it still smelled a little dusty. The old man pointed to the soft bed and said to Huaisher, This is yours. Then he pointed to the old bedding that was casually thrown on the ground and said to Yuan Zhao, This is yours. Okay, differential treatment. Yuan Zhao was used to it. It was better to say that he was satisfied to be able to escape from this family's kitchen alive. No, it should be said that he was completely numb. As soon as the door closed, he lay on his bed on the floor, unable to move, as if he had been burned out. In the silence, only the room across the corridor could be heard. The seriously ill grandfather let out a burst of muddy gasps, like a broken bellows, mixed with hoarse coughs, and occasionally the sound of him taking a few bites after catching his breath. The broken bones were crunched, and the old man's teeth were quite good. After eating 2 servings, he began to call out hoarsely again. Hungry, hungry. Keiko, I'm so hungry. You're so annoying, damn old man. There are still guests here. How much are you going to embarrass our family before you're willing to stop? The old lady angrily scolded. Soon, in a low sound of footsteps, there seemed to be the sound of a bucket being sent into the opposite door. The sound of snoring could be heard. She ate with relish. Huaisher didn't expect such a big pot of porridge to be finished. If it wasn't too presumptuous, he would have knocked on the door and asked the old man if he wanted some side dishes to go with the porridge. In short, it was fine as long as the old man ate happily. Carrying a pink towel, Huaisher went to brush his teeth with the toiletries that Hessian had brought over with a red face. After taking a good bath, Huaisher felt that his tiredness had completely disappeared. Although his chest was still heavily injured, the vegetable porridge and various dishes seemed to be rare delicacies. The ingredients were expensive. After eating 2 bowls, Huaisher could clearly feel that his HP had increased. He should be able to recover by tomorrow morning, right? That was great. Why does he still look like he's half dead? He wiped his hair and looked down at the original photo of the moaning man on the ground. Is he just borrowing a room? Why are you so nervous? Ah, you must have never stayed at a friend's house before, right? This brat was so Chinibu that he might not even have a friend. How pitiful. Being looked at by Huaisher's pitiful gaze, even the weak Yuan Zhao was enraged. He climbed up from the mattress and angrily kicked Huaisher. Do you know what they are? Is there a difference between knowing and not knowing? Huaisher looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Why are you asking so many questions? They warmly entertained us for dinner and even gave us a place to stay. How can a brat like you not know how to be grateful? What fucking gratitude? Yuan Zhao was almost scared out of his wits by Huai Shi's demonic appearance. If it wasn't for the fact that the family of demons and ghosts didn't have any intention of making a move, Yuan Zhao would have already fled in fright. As if he thought of something, the way he looked at Huai Shi became extremely strange. During dinner, the old woman seemed to be particularly attentive in filling Huai Shi's bowl with food. Occasionally, she would look at him as if he was a lively steak, indifferent and with a hint of hunger and scrutiny. It was as if she was looking for a more delicious place. A terrifying thought emerged in his mind. The two of them couldn't have been raised by this family of demons to be slaughtered and eaten once they became fat. Thinking of this, he felt more and more flustered. He lowered his voice and looked at Huai Shi. Don't you think it's too scary? Huai Shi shrugged indifferently. For ordinary people, ascenders are also scary. Moreover, is there anything in hell that isn't scary? Casually, he pulled off the bedding and laid on the soft bed, smelling the faint dust and ancient smell. The dim yellow light illuminated the water stains on the wall. They looked like smiling faces, looking rather cute. Ah, this feeling? That's right. It's as if I'm still living in the stone marrow hall. Incomparably peaceful. All right, hurry up and sleep. He casually turned on the light switch and covered himself with the blanket. Finally, he instructed, the competition will start tomorrow morning. You need to conserve energy. Conserve energy, my ass. I think it's better to fatten you up. When you're about the same weight, you could be slaughtered and eaten. I saw the eyes of the youngest female demon looking at you so thirstily, as if she couldn't wait to eat you alive. When the time comes, maybe her appetite will increase, and she can eat a few more tails. Yuan Zhao cursed silently, lying on the bed, unable to sleep at all. Time passed little by little, and the night deepened. As Huai Shi's snoring gradually sounded, he felt more and more flustered. This time I'm King done for. The gigolo looked as if he had been completely charmed by her. It's like those guys in cartoons who eat too much and turn into pigs. He likes this place so much that he might not like to leave even if you chase him away. Yuan Zhao casually opened the mission panel and found that the mission of encountering demons had disappeared at some point. He didn't know if it was completed or completely failed. There was only a blank space, as if waiting for a new mission to be triggered, but Yuan Zhao had no clue at all. But soon, in the silence, other than the sound of the old man coughing outside the door, there was a faint sound of footsteps, slow and gentle. Stepping on the old floorboards, it emitted a faint creaking sound. It was gradually approaching. Bit by bit, Yuan Zhao opened his eyes wide, feeling his hair stand on end in the eerie sound of approaching footsteps. Then his heart turned cold little by little. They're going to eat me. Yuan Zhao quietly got up and opened his eyes wide. Through the narrow light under the door, he saw a pair of shoes standing at the door. He didn't know how long it had been there. Resisting the urge to scream, he covered his mouth, stretched out his hand, and pushed Huai Shi hard, trying to get him to get up quickly. But Huai Shi was already dead asleep, snoring, and couldn't wake him up at all. As if annoyed by his pushing, he raised his hand and fiddled with Yuan Zhao's wrist. With a push, Yuan Zhao couldn't help but fall on a mattress on the floor. And he had already turned over and continued to sleep. He slept even more soundly. In the silence, the sound of Yuan Zhao falling to the ground was so clear that it made his heart jump and his heart turn cold. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. There was only a gentle knock on the door. Mr. Huai Shi, are you asleep? The gentle voice outside the door sounded so cold, as if it was waiting for them to fall asleep and come in to eat a glutton. Yuan Zhao covered his mouth and stared at the door with wide eyes. But in the end, not a single ferocious female ghost came in to eat him. The person standing at the door waited for a long time, and when there was no response, he quietly left. In the silence, there was only the soft, dripping sound of the rain hitting the window. Yuan Zhao held his breath and looked at the door in fear. After a long, long time, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. His whole body was sweating profusely, and he felt that he had come back from the brink of death. But half of his foot was still outside the cliff. No, I can't just sit here and wait for death. I have to escape from this demon's den. Now I can only rely on myself, young Master Yuan, to turn the tide. He tried hard to summon up his courage and looked around, trying to find a way out. But when he turned around and looked at the window behind him that was covered by curtains, he froze in place, like falling into an ice cave. He didn't know when it started, but outside the window, there was a faint shadow standing quietly. Separated by the curtains, he couldn't see his appearance, but that figure raised his hand and constantly knocked on the window. Gently, like he wanted to continue until the end of time. Again, and again, it knocked on Yuan Zhao's heart, almost making him scream out loud. The ambition that had just risen instantly turned into nothingness. His whole body hid under the blankets, shivering. Hell is so scary. I want to go home. Cousin, say me ah. Yuan Zhao, are you inside? As if his prayer had been received, faintly, Yuan Zhao heard the voice of third elder sister, Mo, coming from outside the window. So familiar. We're here to save you. Yuan Zhao, can you hear me? Hurry and open the window. If you're late, you'll be eaten by the monster hiding inside. Yes, I have to open the window. I have to escape from here. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here and waiting for death. Bang! On the bed, Huaishir, who was sleeping soundly, turned over. The shotgun by the side of the bed was swept by his arm and fell to the ground, making a dull sound, waking the dazed Yuan Zhao from his dream. Then, he was so scared that he almost collapsed on the ground. Until now, he realized that he had unknowingly stood in front of the window, stretching out his hand to pinch the curtains, almost pulling the curtains open. He covered his mouth, carefully retreating, shrinking under the blankets, plugging his ears, not daring to listen to the calling outside the window. After a long time, in his half-awake state, Yuan Zhao finally couldn't hear the sound of knocking on the window. Outside the window behind the curtains was empty. There was no longer that strange figure just now. Yuan Zhao finally heaved a sigh of relief. His whole body went limp, feeling that the ambition just now had disappeared without a trace. Escape is impossible. It's impossible to escape in this lifetime. It's so scary outside. Might as well stay here and let them eat him. Despondently climbing up from the bed, he wiped his face and subconsciously looked behind the curtains. Outside the window, there was nothing. That damn thing, had it really left? He took a deep breath, quietly approached the window, and carefully pinched the curtains. I'll just take a look, He told himself so. Then, he pulled up the corner of the curtains and took a look. He saw a happy eye filled with blood vessels. You're looking at me, right? The face outside the window that looked like a strange bird sneered. Chapter 219. You're looking at me, right? The face that looked like a strange bird outside the window curled into a sinister smile, as if something good had happened. It danced happily outside the window. You're looking at me. You're looking at me. You're looking at me. His head spun wildly around his neck in excitement. Through the window, he looked at Yuan Zhao hungrily and screamed, You're looking at me. Yuan Zhao seemed to be possessed by a nightmare. He was frozen in place. He couldn't move. Only his heart had finally sunk to the bottom of the valley. Outside the window, the slender figure that was half man, half bird screamed excitedly. It suddenly closed its body and threw itself into the window. Then it exploded into a mass of blood in the air, from between a large mouth that suddenly appeared. Bang! Then crunch, crunch, crunch. The strange bird was chewed into mud between the curved horns on the face that was covered in age spots and scars. It was swallowed into a long neck that seemed to have no end. Finally, on the old face, the pair of eyes that were covered in white clouds turned around, causing Yuan Zhao to collapse to the ground. Hungry, still hungry. That voice seemed to have heard it somewhere before. The gloomy and cold face stared straight at Yuan Zhao's appearance, and the voice was hoarse. Have a good sleep, guessed otherwise you will be in. Then the long neck and head slowly shrank back. It was impossible to see where it went. Only the pale and cold moonlight shone through the corner of the curtain, falling on Yuan Zhao's bloodless face. In the silence, the string of reason that was riddled with holes finally snapped. Yuan Zhao fell on his back and fainted on the spot. It had been a long time since he slept so well. It was rare to have a good dream. After Huai Shi woke up, he found that his whole body was extremely relaxed, as if he had been reborn. Moreover, the wound on his chest had already healed. His chest had been pierced by a sniper rifle, but it healed overnight. Wasn't this too illogical? In addition to the vitality provided by the large amount of green plants and the emergency repair of the silver blood medicine, the dinner last night also played an important role. The quality was quite pure. It was just that Yuan Zhao's half-dead face looked exceptionally dejected. "What's with your gloomy face?" "It's a long story." Yuan Zhao looked as if he couldn't bear to look back on the past. He followed behind Huai Shi dejectedly, but he didn't have the feeling of a Chinibu yesterday. After that, he made people feel a little more comfortable to get along with. By the time they finished washing up, breakfast was already prepared. A few exquisite side dishes were paired with the rice, and there was also a rather delicious miso soup. The old lady's culinary skills were not inferior to his. Huai Shi was amazed. When this old one was young, I was also a general of a banquet hall. When the old lady mentioned this, she immediately covered her mouth and laughed softly. "Yes, I'm old now. I can't be compared to back then." After the meal, Huai Shi felt that it was time for him to leave. The old lady didn't say much. She just walked the two of them to the door, then took out an envelope from the entrance and handed it to them. "This is what Lena's father brought home last time. It should be useful for an outsider like you, but it's not safe here, so please be careful." Huai Shi received it. After opening it, he found that there were two unfamiliar badges inside. It seemed to be a work certificate somewhere. Then, he felt the mission panel vibrate, and a new mission suddenly appeared. Obtained relevant clues. The mission chain is activated. Current mission, Road to Staff. Within 24 hours, go to Kitten Paradise, pass the interview, and become an official employee. Kitten Paradise? What is that place? It feels very déjà vu, but Huai Shi couldn't tell. When he picked up the ticket, he vaguely felt a cold gaze looking at him. He raised the lawyer's letter and looked at it from afar. If there was a slight mistake, it would fall on him. After giving one to Yuan Su, Huai Shi expressed her gratitude to the old man. "These are all things that you don't need. Don't worry about it." The old lady smiled and handed over a paper bag. "And this, it was prepared by Lena's child for you to use on the road. Please accept it." That child stayed up all night to prepare it for a long time. Inside the paper bag was a pink lunchbox, which looked quite cute. Under the lunchbox, there were actually several magazines. Huai Shi touched it casually, and a message appeared on the system panel. "Universal magazine, can be equipped on any gun. The number of bullets varies according to the caliber, and it will be replenished every 3 hours." It turned out to be a gold equipment. Huai Shi was dumbfounded. She subconsciously raised her head and looked upstairs. Behind the window, the curtains were suddenly pulled shut, but they were trembling slightly in unease. After a long time, Huai Shi withdrew his gaze and sighed. "Thank Miss Lena for me, but I'm just an outsider, I know." The old lady interrupted him, and a smile appeared on her old face. What a handsome young man, and so considerate. If it was a few decades ago, this old lady would also be tempted. "Thank you for being so gentle to my granddaughter." She took a step forward, tiptoed, and gently straightened Huai Shi's collar and smoothed the wrinkles on his shoulders. Then, she slowly retreated behind the door of the small courtyard, smiled, and bowed to say goodbye. "Mr. Huai Shi, I wish you a safe journey." The sky gradually brightened. Even though there was no sun or stars, a faint light still emerged from the city in the darkness, distinguishing between day and night. Under the faint morning light, the scene in front of him became illusory and fleeting. It was as if it was rapidly moving to the outskirts. Huai Shi saw that the entire house quickly dissipated, and only a wasteland remained in place. The memories of last night were like a dream bubble, becoming exceptionally unreal. The house is gone. Yuan Zhao widened his eyes in disbelief. I saw it. Huai Shi angrily patted the back of his head. You don't say. The back of this naughty kid's head is quite nice to touch. I'll find a chance to pat it a few more times in the future. Well, don't look anymore. We should also set off. Before Yuan Zhao reacted and got angry, Huai Shi changed the topic. Next, I gave you the badge. Are you going to find your companions in the Social Security Bureau? Yuan Zhao took the badge and hesitated for a moment. I signed up myself. I didn't go with them. I can see that. Huai Shi shook his head. If this guy was less Chunibyu and chose to go with the Social Security Bureau, he wouldn't have fallen to this extent. Then, do you want to go with me? Huai Shi asked. With you. Yuan Zhao froze for a moment and unconsciously raised his voice, sizing up Huai Shi in front of him. Indeed, this guy's skill is a little bit better than mine, and he has a good relationship with the demons and ghosts here. For the time being, he can be considered to be of help to me. Although his face is a little effeminate, it's still acceptable. After all, not everyone can be as handsome as me. Although he wants to snatch my cousin, but doesn't this prove that my cousin is very charming? Moreover, it's still unknown who will win her. Yuan Zhao had completely forgotten the sadness he felt 2 days ago when he had to make several keys. He looked at Huai Shi for a long time, and his expression became arrogant again. That's not impossible, but who's going to listen to who? You're kidding. Huai Shi showed a kind smile. Of course I'll listen to you. Otherwise, where can I find another iron-headed, reckless, and gullible little brother like him? Then I reluctantly agree. Yuan Zhao coldly snorted and walked to the front. Don't drag me down. Okay. Huai Shi smiled and followed behind him, once again walking into the dangerous city ahead. And should I tell him that he went the wrong way? Forget it. I'll let him be proud for a while. In the same place on the barren plain, a black old cat stood quietly in the same place, staring at their backs. It seemed to be smiling. The two tails on its back shook slightly. Such a long, bloody, and terrifying night, but with the acceleration of the Xinyu framework, it only took a short hour outside the field. Even so, in this 1 hour, countless thrillers that could only be seen in horror movies played out one after another. Under the malicious editing of the Harkin, it became a story of blood and tears. Those who dared to ignore the system's warning and wander around at night because of their skills were either directly destroyed by the horrifying scenes of 100 Ghost Night, becoming delicious dishes at banquets, or being trampled on by the terrifying monsters that only appeared in urban legends in the corners of the city. Even the Ascended who found a place to stay had to endure the test and selection of the incarnate deities. In just one night, more than 2,000 contestants ushered in a mental breakdown after being trampled on. In the end, they became the monsters' delicacies. Tragic exits. Even the contestants from the major organizations that had been prepared for a long time suffered a lot of losses. However, in the editing of the director's room, between the various scenes of ghosts swallowing people alive, there was a mocking scene of a cowherd and a family of ghosts getting along harmoniously as if they were returning home. Not only was the audience dumbfounded, but even the viewing room in the special seats was filled with an indescribable, awkward atmosphere. The deputy minister of the Jinling branch felt like his entire body was in a mess. What the F*** is a ghost family? Who introduced this kind of genius that could even instantly conquer a woman with a split mouth? The Astronomy Society really picked up a ghost. Fortunately, it wasn't him who picked up the ghost. On the screen of a live broadcast, there was a scene of a reluctant parting. Big sister drink. Big sister smokes. This is awesome. Go away. Big sister doesn't smoke. Big sister, come and take this. This is the honeydew melon I planted in the mountains. Big sister, I'll give you this. I got it from a little bug. On the screen, the originally majestic group of ghosts nodded their heads and bowed like grandchildren, surrounding a woman, asking about her well-being, and hurriedly handing over all kinds of good things. The woman just smiled and took one by one. Finally, she picked up a strange small statue that looked like a doll made of plastic, wearing very little cloth, and had a pair of big 2D eyes. What is this? I think it's something that little bug calls a figurine. Green Ghost lowered his body and hurriedly replied, "It said to be a certificate to go to Autumn Leaf Plain. Big Sister will definitely need it." "Oh, really? Then I'll take it." The woman named Luo Xian smiled and put in her cloth bag, tiptoed, and patted his head to show her gratitude. Green Ghost's whole body was paralyzed on the ground. He didn't dare to move, like a dog, making it easier for Big Sister to touch him. "Then everyone has to go back. I have to go too." She smiled and said goodbye to the ghosts in front of her. "Have you all learned how to knit sweaters? When you go back, practice hard." The group of ghosts nodded like they were pounding garlic, each of them holding the wool balls and sweater needles given by Big Sister, looking like they were dedicating their lives to sweaters, staring at Luo Xian as she turned and left. After Luo Xian left, they collapsed on the ground one by one, as if they had just been saved from a disaster, and cried loudly with tears in their eyes, disappearing into the inexplicable faint light that represented dawn. To a certain extent, it was really a frightening night. Chapter 220. Name: Huaishir. Age: 17. Very young. In the old office, the kitten sitting opposite him looked to Huaishir. To be exact, it was a middle-aged man wearing a plush toy. The plush toy had not been washed for a long time and was dirty, and the user did not seem to care about it at all. He sat inside and smoked, and from time to time, a hand came out from the kitten's mouth to flick the ash. As a result, smoke rose from the kitten's eyes. Oh my God, is he going to become an immortal? Since he came to this place, he was taken directly into this office with the help of the badge and was interviewed by the kitten manager, who looked exactly the same as the one on the sign of the kitten paradise. Huaishir looked at the tables all over the room. Then he looked at the light bulbs covered with cobwebs above his head and the pile of junk food in the corner. In the faint smell of sweat, he could not help but hold his breath. He always felt that this lousy amusement park was going to close down. Was there really a future in working here? He really did not understand what was going on with this mission. The kitten looked at Huaishir for a long time and suddenly said, "Why did you come to apply for a job at such a young age?" Huaishir was stunned. He heard that the people of Yingzhou were particularly perverted and asked a lot of tricky questions during the interview. He had prepared a lot of answers along the way, but he did not expect to be faced with such a question. He could not answer it. "Well, I don't care." Young Cat took a puff of the cigarette and flicked the ash away like an old salted fish. "According to the result of our discussion with those guys, we won't reject anyone who applies with a badge, so you don't have to worry about us not hiring you. After all, everyone works for love and dreams. Even if there's a work injury, we won't be responsible." "Hey, did you say something particularly heartless as a matter of course? It's common to work with a thick plushie on a hot day. Even if you faint from the heat, you can't take it off. Otherwise, you'll scare the children. 18 hours of high-intensity work a day and dealing with the difficulties of rude and unreasonable customers. Before the age of 30, you would have developed a body of occupational disease. But even if you cry, you still have to squeeze out a smile to fulfill the customer's wishes. This is the true meaning of a staff job, kid. No, you're just squeezing the poor, ordinary employees out of their own pockets. But you're lucky. You don't have to work so hard." Xiaomai stubbed out the cigarette in the pile of ashtrays and tossed over a tattered form. "That Hirata kid does occasionally send over a lot of fish, so the person recommended by his family shouldn't be a problem. Furthermore, from the murderous aura around you, I can tell that you are quite capable. You should be able to pick a place for yourself." Xiaomai nodded. Huaishir lowered his head and looked at the strange job positions. He was confused. Lightning strikes the mountains? A huge world? Earth's core pit? What kind of job is that? You don't know. Xiaomai's tone became helpless. Based on what you outsiders call it, it should be called a revival competition. Reckless outsiders who don't follow the rules and mess around are beaten up by the local gangs. Those who haven't died are all sent here to watch our performance. Yes, your performance. And then, Huaishir asked, I'll play the piano, perform a show, and then everyone will have a happy day? That's right. Of course not. The visitor's mission is to eat, drink, and have fun. Kitten sneered and explained, the guy who can finish all the projects in our amusement park today is qualified to return to the competition. We can let him go out and continue to cause trouble. But the guy who dies here can't be helped. He has to leave the competition completely. Then my job, Huaisher had a bad feeling. Haven't I made it clear enough, kid? Xiao Mai's eyes revealed a trace of malice. No matter what position you work in, what method you use, or what kind of show you perform, kill all the visitors in your venue. The faster the better, the more miserable the better, and the more the better. That's your job. The more outstanding your performance, the higher your salary, and the more chances you'll have for promotion. Have I explained it clearly enough? Huaisher asked the last question. What if I'm killed? Then your participation qualification will be given to the tourists. Xiao Mai shrugged, then raised the doll's cat paw and patted the table. He came closer and said in a tone of a big brother, well, since you received the badge I sent out, you can be considered as an employee I recruited. Don't say that I didn't take you in. While those little bitches haven't taken all the good places yet, choose the best place for me to see. He lowered his head to study the map on the form. He suddenly reached out and patted it. This is it. This is the best place. There are more than 10 old employees that can be assigned to you. Evil Spirit. Castle? Huaisher read out the meaning of the number on the map word by word. He raised his head and asked, in other words, I'm going to run a haunted house. Yes. Xiao Mai was satisfied with his understanding. He pointed at him and said, You have a haunted house. For some reason, it felt like he had said something serious. Even the Book of Destiny felt the scary presence in those words and started to tremble subtly. You don't like this name? Xiao Mai looked at him with confusion. Okay, then, I'll change it for you. To run such a strange and scary place, I'll call you the Furtive Land. Wait. The Book of Destiny trembled even harder. Huaisher quickly raised his hand. Change it again. This won't do, that won't do. You're so hard to deal with. Since you've officially joined, I'll call you Full Duty High. Big brother, can you stop messing with me? Then, I don't care what that is. It has nothing to do with me. Ah, and I thought you married into the Hirata family. Now it looks like you betrayed them. Please don't put me in the role of a scumbag, okay? Also, you're crossing the line. Fine, fine. Xiao Mai scratched his chin and sighed helplessly. Since you don't want to, I won't be a busybody. Then, he turned around to look at the big brother next to Huaisher, who had been ignored by him and his lackeys for a long time. He said nonchalantly, As for you. Then he suddenly paused and raised his head. Looking at Yuan Zhao, Xiao Mai sucked in a cold breath. He seemed to be shocked. I haven't seen someone with such talent in many years. Yuan Zhao was startled, but soon his eyebrows slowly raised. He knew that his talent as an unpolished jade was truly too earth-shattering. Even this unknown monster opposite him was shocked. The cat studied him and said seriously, I can see that you're very experienced in the use of long weapons, right? Of course. A cold glint comes first, then the spear comes out like a dragon. You're that good. Xiao Mai was overjoyed. If you're fast, how's your strength? Strong and powerful. You know that, right? Yuan Zhao raised his thumb and pointed at his own nose. That's me. Huaisher, who felt that something was amiss, couldn't help but shake his head. After being praised by Xiao Mai, this kid is so arrogant. Do you really think that this kind of bloodless and tearless capitalist will have a daughter to marry you? It's so good to be young. Your future is limitless. Then, Xiao Mai picked up a shovel and stuffed it into Yuan Zhao's hand. He said sincerely, You're young, but you're very diligent. Stay here and help me shovel the cat litter. What? Yuan Zhao held the shovel and was dumbfounded. I'm sorry to say this, but I've been suffering from diarrhea for the past 2 days, so I've been using a lot of cat litter. Xiao Mai pointed at the hill outside the window. See that little mound over there? That is, your job is to finish shoveling it before sunset. Come on, you can do it. Then he waved his hand. Xiao Mai suddenly disappeared from the room. The next moment, he fell from the room, screaming, into the cat litter. That's so bad. Huaisher couldn't help but pull his neck back. He pitied the kid from the bottom of his heart. Xiao Mai was already sitting on the chair. He lit his cigarette happily and tossed a badge into Huaisher's arms. He waved his hand and shouted, "Next!" The door was pushed open, and the candidate who had been waiting outside walked in. But this time, Xiaomai didn't have the Hirata family's backing, so his tone became impatient. "What's your name? Where are you from? What's your job?" Before the person could reply, Huaishi's shocked voice was heard. "Why are you here?" "That's what I wanted to ask." The girl with the sword raised her eyes to look at him, and the corner of her eyes twitched. "But now it looks like we're competitors, legendary Chan." Huaishi smiled and waved the badge at her. "Then you'll have to work hard. Amber kiss." The young man pushed the door open and walked away. Tom was not on his side. There was still an hour before the park opened at 8 p.m. He needed to familiarize himself with the working environment and his new subordinates. No matter what the hell this mission was, unless his performance was up to par, the next step would be nowhere in sight. Once he thought about the fact that his next opponent would be a competitor like himself, Huaishi rubbed his palms together in excitement. 10 minutes later, Huaishi lost all hope. Before he arrived, he had been wondering if there were zombies inside this ghost castle with its crappy name. But there really were. At the edge of the abandoned amusement park, there was a dilapidated castle. It was covered in dust, and traces of fighting and killing could be seen everywhere. A gloomy atmosphere permeated the place. When the wind blew, the broken wooden door let out a shrill sound that made one's ears ache. It was eerie and depressing. However, the resting room at the top of the castle was filled with the smell of salted fish. Chapter 221. 1. 90,000. Raise. Stand up straight. In a hustle and bustle, more than a dozen salted fish zombies with a rotten smell were sitting in front of a few tables, smoking, scratching their feet, drinking beer, and playing mahjong. The atmosphere was foul and looked terrible. Seeing Huaishi come in, some of them looked back. "Ah, the new team leader is here? He looks very young. It's over. I'm afraid today's performance won't be good. Anyway, I don't get paid. Performance doesn't matter. Mother Faster's Kerr, did you just steal my cards? Is this card yours? Do you think it will answer you if you call it? You really need to learn your lesson. Grandson, come on." Before they could even finish their greetings, the zombies started fighting with each other. "You pull my neck off, I break your waist with a kick." Broken limbs and bones rolled all over the ground. Huaishi's eyes almost fell out of their sockets when she saw this. Each of them really had a unique skill. These guys, were they specially here to be beaten up? They couldn't even be beaten to death. Anyway, this group of people still knew the rules. After the fight, one by one, they came to meet Huaishi and told him their positions. They said that if there was anything he needed, he could just let them know. If he couldn't, he couldn't. In the corner, there were two zombies reading pornographic magazines and chatting with each other. "There's a new pinball shop in Mitakawa. How about we go and have a look after work?" "No, Rico hasn't been feeling well these 2 days. I have to bring back 2 pounds of fresh meat." "Is she pregnant again?" "Yeah, it's the third one." "Congratulations, congratulations." Huaishi almost doubted his life. "What the F***CK is pregnant?" "Brother, you're a zombie." The two of them, however, were chatting happily. "Taro is 4 years old this year." "Yeah." The fat zombie looked back at Huaishi. "Team leader, you haven't seen the photo of my family yet, right?" As he spoke, he took out a photo of his wife and child from his pocket and showed it to him. "I'm fat now. I wasn't like this when I was thin. Look, I'm smiling so happily." Huaishi took a closer look and saw the couple holding 2 charcoal-like children in the photo. "Oh no, these colleagues are not reliable at all." Huaishi's head was about to explode. With such a group of teammates, how were they supposed to fight? He had read the regulations before he came. The ghost castle could support up to 4 visitors at a time. There was still half an hour before the park opened, which meant that once the park opened, Huaishi would immediately become a 4-man dungeon boss waiting to be killed. Even a group of weakest ascenders would have at least 4 of them. If they weren't careful, they would be doomed. In the end, they had to deal with this group of trash. How was this working? They were more like gifting kids. Huaishi sighed. In the end, he asked seriously, "How do you usually send cough, cough, how do you work?" The zombie at the front raised his hand and answered, "Sit at the desk and wait for people to come in." Then go up and bite them. Try not to let them run away. They seem to have a good working attitude. Huaishir nodded and asked another question. What if they run away? Another zombie raised his hand. Then sit back and wait for the next one. Okay, are they all dogs? I'll think of a way. Huaishir scratched his head and tried to think as he walked around the castle. In terms of atmosphere, it was still okay. Although the traps were a little old-fashioned, they were still barely usable. The various forks and fake doors were also done decently, making it worthy of being called maze. But they couldn't stop people. Huaishir walked around and came back. He looked at the salted zombies in the lounge and suddenly asked, "Can zombies get sick, HM?" The zombies looked at each other in astonishment and shook their heads. They can't. After all, they're all dead. They haven't even caught a cold for so many years. That's good. Huaishir's eyes suddenly lit up. Looking at the dozen or so salted zombies smoking and playing cards, it was like looking at a dozen or so nutritious petri dishes. After thinking for a moment, he casually picked up a metal cup about the size of a beer mug. Then he took out a knife and cut his hand. He watched as his faint green blood flowed into the cup. When it was about done, he applied some silver blood potion as a band-aid. It just so happened that he knocked down a lot of trees on the way here. He was a bit overnourished, so he treated it as blood donation. The cup full of blood with an ominous aura gently rippled in the cup. Under Huaishir's reckless infusion of origin substances, it quickly changed. Countless strains that were hard to see with the naked eye crazily grew from it. Huaishir was afraid that it wasn't enough. He rubbed 2 handfuls of ash and sprinkled it in, causing the liquid in the cup to instantly turn pitch black. Finally, he took out the spear of compassion and sprinkled a few dozen grams of dragon blood in it. With a whoosh, the blood in the entire cup instantly stirred, as if it was boiling and bubbling nonstop. "Drink, this is my happy water." Huaishir picked up the cup and placed it in front of them. He revealed a smile. "Come, hurry up. Everyone has a sip. Drink it and you'll be happy." Under Huaishir's instigation, the zombies all poured this seemingly happy water into their stomachs. Then they instantly became happy. Oh, I feel power. So happy. This is the feeling of growth. I'm even more rotten. I have an extra head. Under the catalysis of the virus that was almost like an alchemy poison, the zombies were instantly dyed with a layer of green. They looked incomparably harmonious, and mushrooms grew out of their heads. In the damp and rotten shells, the mushrooms grew happily. Like dandelions, they quickly split and spread in all directions, instantly turning the zombies into poisonous corpses. According to Huaishir's observations, it seemed that everyone's poison was different. Type A's had the origin smallpox, Type B's had the hell's flu, and Type O's had all kinds of strange things. It was as if they were farming, and mushrooms kept growing out of their heads. There was even a zombie that had sunflowers growing out of its head. In the short period of transformation, time had already flown by quickly. In the blink of an eye, the alarm sounded outside. In a few minutes, the tourists would enter the park, and the game was about to begin. "Okay, cheer up. It's time to go to work." Huaishir urged the group of listless zombies to hurry up and get ready to work. "Do you still remember where your job is?" "I'm in the library." "I'm in the kitchen." "I'll go to the hall." "I'll go stroll around." One by one, the zombies slowly dragged their feet, weakly walking into the depths of the castle. In the end, there's only one skinny old zombie left sitting on the chair in the lounge. Among all the zombies, he was the most rotten. His flesh was almost all falling off. He looked old and clumsy. Rather than calling him a zombie, it was better to call him a skeleton. He simply fell apart with a touch. To come to work at this level, he was simply diligent and loved his job. Huaishir looked at him with reverence and admiration and asked, "What are you responsible for?" The old zombie raised his head and stiffly showed a flattering smile. He raised the 80-year-old newspaper in his hand and said, "Read newspaper." "Okay." Huaishir's eyes twitched. How could there be office bullying between zombies? Black-hearted capitalists are really scary. Speaking of which, the old man was already so old. Why was he still standing at his job? Did he have a job? Reading the newspaper every day must be very boring. He sighed and pointed to the table, Then you stay here. Someone came in. What should I do? Huaisher looked at him for a long time. Although he looked scary, he didn't look like he could fight very well. He was afraid that if he rushed up and was kicked, he would fall apart on the spot. At that time, the contestants would broadcast beating up the old man. It would be a tragedy. It wouldn't be harmonious. Then you can play mahjong with them. Huaisher thought for a moment and brought a set of mahjong over. Regardless of whether it was useful or not, it could be used as a diversion tactic for the time being. In order to set off the atmosphere, he also stuffed the old humidifier in the room under the old zombies, but put a few handfuls of ashes, and, after plugging it in, curling gray smoke slowly rose from the old zombie's mouth. At first glance, it looked like it was ascending to the sky. In the gloomy horror, it was full of the aura of a boss. Complete the job. Huaisher clapped his hands, listened to the gradually urgent alarm outside the castle, waved his hand, and turned down the power switch in the lounge. In an instant, darkness came and swallowed everything. Only the gate of the castle opened with a bang. Amidst the moaning of the zombies, the ghost castle officially opened. In the next moment, countless figures descended from the sky. Resurrection mission. Clear the kitten paradise within 8 hours. Completion reward. Restore the qualification to participate. Please explore the rest of the reward yourself. In an instant, thousands of sublimators who had fallen into a nightmare woke up screaming and found themselves standing on the square. The contestants who had been eliminated on the first day were pulled into this paradise specially prepared for the resurrection game and became one of the countless tourists. Then, countless information poured into their consciousness from the system panel, a second chance, and a better opportunity. Whether it was for this group of losers or the contestants who hosted the theme park project, there was no doubt that this was a challenge worth gambling everything on. Unlike the cannon fodder who rushed to the front and rushed into any project, the challengers who had a brain basically stayed in place and took the time to read the thick project introduction book in their hands. They began to carefully screen the projects they wanted to choose. In the book, it contained a brief introduction of all the rides in the kitten paradise. According to the difficulty of the attractions, the conditions required to clear the park were also different. Some high-difficulty attractions only required 1 to clear, while some attractions marked as low-difficulty threats often required 4 or 5 to clear before they could accumulate enough progress to clear the park. Some daring challengers threw out the only 3 quick challenge tickets in their hands and directly skipped the contestants in front of them. They locked onto the most difficult projects such as Thunder Mountain, Earth's Core Pit, Death Roller Coaster, and so on, intending to reduce the risk and clear the game in one go. After all, they only had one life. No matter how low the threat level of the project was, there was a possibility of failure in the face of the host who had the geographical advantage. It was far better to finish it in one go. When someone saw the small line of words at the end of the introduction book, their eyes instantly lit up. After killing the host, not only could they obtain the qualification to participate, but they could also inherit the host's progress and all the equipment. Soon, after various calculations and trade-offs, the challengers embarked on the path they chose, either full of confidence or full of uneasiness. As the boiling crowd rushed in all directions, the kitten paradise was like a bloody meat grinder, slowly starting to move. In the constant whining, under the gray sky, this place had turned into a demon's den. Huaisher heard the sound of the door being pushed open. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.